Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to another ArchCast special, where today I am joined by a legal mindset.
My pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much for joining me today. It's early morning where you are.
Very, very early morning, but I am happy to return the favor since, anytime that I have someone on my channel, I am glad to come on theirs. And I am always happy to talk Disney at any time of the day or morning.
I mean, hey, if nothing else, we can say that Disney is still providing entertainment in one form or another.
Yes, even if it's legal entertainment through their many, many, many lawsuits, which we're going to discuss tonight. I never thought that I could find almost nonstop coverage with the corporation until I covered Disney.
Well, it's because Disney just doesn't run out of shit, apparently. We actually had a little discussion before we started, because I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about. And the sheer amount of legal trouble Disney seems to find itself in constantly it's difficult to quantify.
And most of it, the crazy thing is, most of this is what I would classify as a self-report or perhaps even a self-own, because they do these things to themselves. They walk right into them, either through just sheer blinding incompetence or knowing that taking certain insane positions is going to end them up in legal liability, but really not caring, really having that true level of hubris where they think they are above the law, where they think they are above scrutiny, where they think they can throw some pixie dust on it. And hey, it's going to be all right. It's going to be fine because we're Disney. We're unassailable.
Yep.
And that's not the case.
A lot of these problems are of their own creation.
Yes, this is the sheer fucking hubris of Disney, which just happens time and time again. And you see them, when these things happen, it couldn't happen to a better corporation.
Certainly not.
Yeah. So when I first started covering Disney, I started covering it because this is my background, because I actually saw the issues with Reedy Creek when I was working in Florida. So, of course, I'm a Florida attorney. I now live in Asia, and now I'm, far removed from Florida locally. But I used to live there, and I used to attend these special district meetings and be this attorney that specialized in these weird Florida special districts, which are largely used as a tool to develop the state, because Florida, for those that may or may not know, in the continental U.S., was largely the last state to be developed. I'm not counting Alaska over here, but it was one of those states where, really there was active development going on, even the last decades, to turn effectively swampland that was unusable into, well, really occupied country, really occupied land. And I dealt with, in Central Florida, the Reedy Creek Improvement District, which is a district that covers Disney World, because the area around Disney has been rapidly developed. Not just because it's close to Disney, but because, well, largely they've turned those orange fields into places where there are homes. And so I had worked with them. I had worked across the table from them and been screwed over by the Reedy Creek Improvement District as an attorney. So when I saw them getting into a fight with the Florida governor, when I saw them causing trouble, I said, oh, no, 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 no. You don't want to go down this road, Reedy Creek, because I know what skeletons you have under the closet. I know what's going on here, and this is not going to end well for you. And lo and behold, 2 years later, I am feeling very, very vindicated as the skeletons, at least some of the skeletons, are coming out about Disney. So that's my sort of background for this, for those that haven't seen my show, or maybe perhaps don't know more about me.
Absolutely. And as you say, too, because initially here, The idea is, as you say, to create like a special development district for the enormous industrial potential in terms of tourism and just general, like all of the support structure that Disney would require, right? To build up the Magic Kingdom. And that was the idea why they were given a lot of extra legal powers to really do this thing, to really build this huge area and all of the infrastructure around it. And this was intended to be like an entire city at one time. This is what a lot of people don't know, that Disney was intended to build like entire, practically like town around itself with schools and universities and hospitals and road maintenance and all of this stuff. None of which ever actually happened.
Yeah, that was the promise. In fact, they explicitly promised the legislature that it was sold to Florida as this experimental prototype community of tomorrow, Epcot. And instead of a city, we got a golf ball. And the golf ball of Epcot, which, you know, is the theme park, has nothing to do with any of what was promised. And mainly the reason why they had all these powers and resources is because the intention was for them to build that city where actual people lived. There was housing, like you said, churches, schools, etc. And they built none of that. There is zero of that. In fact, the only community that was built, Celebration, which, by the way, is my former client, was actually removed, de-annexed from Reedy Creek so that nobody who's an actual citizen would live within the boundaries of Reedy Creek. They literally went out of their way to undermine the original purpose of Reedy Creek. And by the way, this is not the first time that Reedy Creek has been threatened. Over the years, people have repeatedly threatened to sue Reedy Creek, to attack their charter, to attack their reason for existence. And in fact, they ended up settling in the 90s with Orange County upon such a threat because they wanted them to not look so closely behind the curtain, behind the window. So this was something that a lot of people in Florida had thought was coming for a very, very long time. And it's something that is dissimilar from other places in Florida where you would have eventually voters controlling a government. Now, some of these districts do have corporations which control them for the beginning period. Developers do often control these governments for a short period of time in the beginning when they're first getting off the ground, but they eventually move over and transition into into voter control. And this is something that typically happens unless there is a broad spectrum of commercial interests which are collaborating in a district, such as in another one of my clients and another district which is attached to Disney, which is right next to Disney, the Bonnet Creek Community Development District, one of my clients. They were made up of several hotels and a representative from each of those hotels. So the Waldorf, the Wyndham, the JW, all of these, the Hilton, they each had an individual on this board that was speaking for their representative company, for their particular company. So they each were able to have a voice, come together and collaborate for this particular district. But it wasn't like Disney where one specific district controlled it all, and also where they would use their powers to extort the minority interests. So the interest of those 14, 15, 16% of taxpayers, which are not Disney, because within the boundaries of Reedy Creek, there were about roughly 16% of the taxpayers, which were not Disney, which were other entities. And they were widely abusing those folks. They were double, triple taxing them through separate agreements they had with those folks. So there's a lot of shenanigans that were going on in Reedy Creek, which is why, you know, I dubbed it the Seedy Creek, in fact.
Yep. And that was eventually now replaced by the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, as the beginning of a fairly lengthy now legal battle between the state of Florida and Disney, and Ron DeSantis as a major participant.
Right, and this was been very much misaligned, this kind of fight. Obviously, the kickoff was related to comments that Disney was making, political comments that Disney was making. However, all the government requires to change something is a single valid reason. Even if they, initiated it or paid attention to it, or their eyes were drawn to this because of their comments related to Florida political acts, such as the Parental Rights and Education Bill, which is the legal name of that bill. Now, of course, some in the particularly leftist media may call that the quote unquote "don't say gay" bill, but that's no more accurate than calling it the anti-grooming bill, which would be the other way to frame that, the other biased way to frame that if you want to frame it on the other side of the spectrum. So I choose to call it the Parental Rights and Education Bill because that's the legal name of the bill. But their need to speak up over that drew the attention of the state, but the state had a laundry list of very legitimate reasons to reform the Reedy Creek, to change their charter. And in fact, the CFTOD did a report. There was an 84-page report on the level of corruption and potential illegal activities. And I only say potential because they haven't yet been proven in court, although I'm very sure they could prove almost all of them in a concrete fashion, including, exploitation of public funds or misuse of public funds, fraud, mismanagement, lack of payment of certain taxes that they were liable for, a misappropriation of government benefits, a use of company cards to do things like get Disney discounts, trips, cruises, etc. All these corrupt acts were going on at a government, and Disney was, as a corporation, was enabling these. In fact, they knew they were doing these things for decades and did nothing. They were enabled to do these things. So that justified Ron DeSantis in Florida to come in and change it, if for that alone, to stop the corruption alone. And Disney, of course, claimed this was First Amendment and claimed they were being attacked based on First Amendment, which was an interesting novel argument that the First Amendment allows you to engage in possibly the worst corporate corruption in U.S. modern history. A very novel argument, we'll say, from a legal standpoint. And a federal judge thought this too, and in fact dismissed their lawsuit, because the truth is, in terms of the lawsuits that they had with Ron DeSantis in Florida, they brought the first lawsuit. Disney brought the lawsuit into federal court first, because governments have to get things approved. They have to go through public meetings. So Disney, when they saw that the CFTOD, the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, was going to nullify their last-minute illegal contracts with Disney, they preemptively filed in federal court. Then the district itself filed in state court, which generated two separate lawsuits. They lost the federal case, although they appealed it, and that appeal was pending. And they were going into discovery in the state case. They were depositioning the folks for the state case. And that, my friends, is the point at which they decided to settle. And we finally got this settlement. And this is something that I said for a very long time. The real pain for Disney has always been discovery. The second the sunshine hits them on some of these crimes, on some of these things they were doing, and it comes to light, there will be not just let's say bad PR, but they will necessitate criminal charges against folks within the Walt Disney Corporation, former employees of Reedy Creek, and that would go up even potentially to the federal level, where you might have SEC violations, IRS violations. So this is something they did not want out there, and therefore they entered into this settlement, which did a lot of things. Let me take a sip of this water before I explain.
Yep. Because, as you mentioned too, the report you brought up, which, as you say, none of it has been proven in court, etc. But a lot of the stuff in that report was very, very blatant. Like how, for example, the officially appointed investigators were denied access to the government's own assets within the Reedy Creek Development District by Disney employees. Like, it was bad for Disney, and so Discovery would undoubtedly have been very problematic.
Yeah, imagine owning a power plant. You own a power plant. It is a government power plant. And they are told, the government, that they can't access the plant that they own. And the reason why, the kicker here is they can't access this power plant because it's not actually producing any power. That's the real kicker here. It hasn't produced a single kilowatt of power. It hasn't produced a smidgen of power at all whatsoever. It is merely for quote unquote backup. And you'll love this. It's in fact, for all their green initiative, it's in fact a coal-fired power plant. Coal.
Of
but
course.
hasn't produced a single drop of power. Now, some people may say, well, I've seen Disney and they have all these solar panels. Well, guess what? They don't actually own any of those solar panels. And Reedy Creek doesn't own any of those solar panels. They actually lease the property to Duke Energy, a private company, to put those solar panels up so they can make private gain from the revenue on that solar power. So in fact, Disney and Reedy Creek, through those apparatus, through those things that they have bought with taxpayer money, doesn't actually produce any power. And yet there is actually a subsidiary, which is very devious of them. There is a subsidiary of Disney called Reedy Creek Energy Services. This is a actual subsidiary of Disney, but this is a full-on mini company which is meant to run these energy infrastructure pieces which don't actually do anything. Now, this, as part of the settlement, the crazy thing is, I called out this contract, and I thought nobody would notice it or bring attention to it, because I always knew there was an issue with this contract, even when I was working across the table from these folks. And they had, at the last minute, right before the old Reedy Creek they controlled was disbanded and it went over to the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District appointed by DeSantis, they had extended the contract with this Reedy Creek Energy Services, this Disney subsidiary. They'd extended that contract till 2031, but they've actually clawed that back as part of their settlement, which I imagine as soon as that contract is up, they are going to renegotiate it, fire Disney, and just directly work with the private energy company to get what they need for, municipal utility purposes, because, well, they're not really doing anything. Disney is just acting as this instrument of graft, which is skimming off the top while doing absolutely nothing. Also, when they came in, the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District got rid of the mandatory DEI that they had as part of the governmental process and procedures. They implemented these mandatory DEI employees, which were, cut out. And also these hiring rubrics, which mandated certain vendors, which they would classify as quote unquote diverse, whether it's African-American or quote unquote women owned businesses. But actually these were neither fair nor free bidding. This was just them handing out these contracts through very specifically tailored criteria to their friends. This was a nepotistic contract award where they would have a no bid contract issued, which means in a typical government bidding process, you go out and you get multiple bidders and you say, who will do this job at a certain quality, at a certain price? And if you set certain criteria, you can factor in things like their corporate structure as part of the criteria. You could say that theoretically, but that's not what they were even doing. They were saying, nope, nope, nope. We're just going to, under the guise of DEI and minority influence, issue the contract automatically without putting it out to bid. Just issue it directly to somebody without bidding out, which is horribly in violation of standard government practice, and is pretty much textbook nepotism. So this is just amongst the many things they were doing. So when the CFTOD came in, it was very much justified to clean these things up. And other things that were being done, which were egregious, were things like blocking access for veterans. There were public paths which led between certain housing as well as certain golf courses, the Shades of Green golf course, which is a veterans golf course. Yeah, there were public paths that led between this golf course and Disney World. Well, Disney was actually blocking these public paths so people could not traverse on them for reasons. For Disney magical reasons, without really explaining why or how, or there really being a serious public problem with them traversing these things, just because, and stopping veterans, which have perhaps given the most for the country, from accessing Disney World through these publicly paid for taxpayer paths. So they were doing all of these things, all of which, have been brought under scrutiny and which were dealt with as part of this process. They actually backed down from that one and backed up those paths because, well, we called these things out. I called these things out. Others called these things out. Now, as part of this settlement, what this settlement ultimately ended up doing was it ended up resolving both of the lawsuits. So it ended up ending the state lawsuit. So that lawsuit is concluded. Disney admitted, and this is the craziest thing, they admitted that what they did, the agreements they entered into at the last second, were illegal. They also admitted that a process they had to do called the comprehensive planning process, this is a mandatory process for every government in Florida, which you are supposed to plan ahead at what you're going to develop in the future. They admitted that the process they used was illegal to develop their next comprehensive plan.
Guarantees
admitted it as part of the settlement. We can say, without them being able to come at us for defamation, that they did something illegal in that process, that they broke the law. And therefore, their old comprehensive plan was void, their last-minute agreements were void, and they're going to have to go through the CFTOD for every single building approval, every single thing they will do in the future. Now, in exchange, and this is the big one, they got an agreement from the CFTOD that they own certain development credits. Now, this is something I brought up. It's a very niche, weird quirk, facet of Florida law, whereby when you develop something, when you develop a property of land that's undeveloped, you need to have a certain amount of quote unquote development credits. And how you get these is through conserving land or paying for conservation credits, which is money towards the conservation of wetlands, of untouched areas in Florida. So Disney as a company had paid for at some point conservation, at some point mitigation credits. And that's supposed to go towards development credits that they can use for building stuff, like expanding the Magic Kingdom. Well, this whole fight with Florida brought into question whether or not they actually truly own those credits. And like I was saying, that was probably their only legitimate argument, was whether or not they own these credits. Now, they ended up, the CFTD ended up saying, yes, you do get the credits, but you've got to come to us for approval on anything you want to build. You've still got to do that. So that's part of this settlement agreement is, yes, you get the credits, you get the points for all this conservation land that you've paid for. We're going to allow you to do that, but you've got to come to us. You've got to come through us. So they've got to play nice with the state of Florida, the CFTOD, and Ron DeSantis going forward. Because if they don't, not so much as a water closet, not so much as Mickey's magical bathroom will be built in the state of Florida. And that is the status quo there for the settlement. Now, once again, this does not settle all of their lawsuits. We're going to talk about a lot of other lawsuits, but this does handle those two lawsuits. And in fact, the lawsuits that I was most intimately engaged with. So I hope that's clear, Arch. I hope that was a decent explanation.
I think so. And this is the biggest one. Disney did also get, I believe, a couple of board members on the new Central Florida Tourism Oversight District, which is a fucking mouthful every time I need to say it. But they are now actually under the law of Florida, whereas previously they practically weren't. They were getting their own taxes, they were handing out their own bribes, which they charged the state of Florida for. They were building shit willy-nilly, regardless of anything else, whereas now there is actually governmental control. You could kind of view this as a win for Disney, in that at least they won't be dragged through court for very obvious illegal actions. But on the other hand, I do wonder if Disney will be able to continue to be Disney without all of these special privileges and profits.
Yeah, I think they're going to have to watch themselves. Because without their ability to control it to this same degree, and also subjecting themselves to true transparency. In Florida, we have stuff called sunshine laws. Disney felt itself exempt from these sunshine laws, exempt from the rules, exempt from a lot of the basics of governance. And now that they have to operate like this, they're not going to be able to operate in the same way. And by the way, yes, they did get board members, but they actually didn't get control. So they got a board member, I believe one board member, maybe there's going to be two that are going to step up. But once again, not enough to control the district entirely. So they're going to get a sympathetic ear or two, but not enough to override. And certainly Ron DeSantis has a discretion as to who they can appoint on that. So he can go the other way if he chooses to go the other way, let's say.
Yes.
So yes, they've got a sympathetic ear or two, but they don't have control over this. So this is a big one, and this is something where they're not going to be able to run it the same way, because they were essentially using this government entity to subsidize their business. And I cannot understate how much money this saved them over the long run. In fact, I was quoted by this pretty early on by WW Pro, and people guffawed when I said trillions of dollars. But when I said trillions of dollars, I meant because Disney has been around for 60 years. So my presumption is that Disney will be around for another 60 years. I mean, whether or not it's owned by Walt Disney is speculative, but it's very difficult, nigh impossible, to pick these pieces of infrastructure up, put them on a truck, and send them to another state. In the continental United States, there is really not land to develop this, and particularly not within reach of a major metropolitan city. Some people might say, well, you could do it in North Dakota or Montana or something like that. Sure, but you've got a population that is involving some buffalo and a couple cows. That's not the same thing as Florida, which is now the third largest state in the union, passing New York in terms of population and electoral votes. So you're not going to get the same sort of influence if you were to move this to another state.
Yes, if Disney were to try to move it, it would put them back over 50 years, which is not really a good thing. And when you say about like what it's cost as well, to take a quick example here, there was the audit which seemed to indicate that Disney owed $2 million in back taxes. That was just for the employee fringe benefits in 2022 alone. So in a single year, in a single instance, Disney has probably gotten away with $2 million in unpaid taxes. Now take that number, multiply it by about 10, and then add that for 50 odd years, yeah, there was a lot of money. And this is, again,
Yes.
just on fringe benefits. We're not even talking about, like, property taxes or the impact
Right.
taxes, etc. Like, there's a lot of money
Right.
here.
Impact fees, yeah, and that's a big one. They never paid impact fees, which are the fees that go towards developing things like roads and pipes and pavement that's supposed to complement your development. So, for example, as Central Florida has grown, because that region has grown into one of the largest regions of Florida, whereby when it was 60 years ago, it was just a bunch of swamps. Orlando was largely a military base, which is why. In fact, I represented Universal for a period of time. And in fact, I knew about their Epic Universe theme park when I was working there, years ago. But they're still finding in certain places unexploded ordnance from post-World War II, where they were testing out, there was an area with like a bombing range that they were testing out in Central Florida. There's also a huge Lockheed plant there, which is adjacent to the new Universal theme park, which goes hand in hand with Cape Canaveral and servicing Cape Canaveral, right, as our space launch facility, which has always been, our space program has always been intimately tied with our military, complex. So Orlando really has grown now, and that's a big thing. It's something they really can't get if they moved elsewhere. And like I said, like we talked about, if you look at the cost of building things, it's only become more expensive over time. Building a building or building infrastructure was easier 60 years ago. You could put in something like a monorail, which they have there at the theme park, for much cheaper 50, 60 years ago than you could today. If you tried to redo the construction of the monorail today, it would be a much more expensive process than if it was years ago. So you got to factor in the fact they didn't pay for a lot of these things in the same way. They subsidized them. They used tax-free bonds, government bonds, to finance many things. They actually used government bonds to finance the parking garages, the private parking garages that are used at Disney Springs, which are only available for use by Disney as a corporation, which is an insane, just by itself, an insanely corrupt misuse of bond funding in and of itself. But you take these things in the aggregate, and trillions is accurate, right? Because you think, okay, this is the benefit they had in the past, and then they're losing that benefit into the future. They can no longer do these things in the future. They can no longer mandate that the government buy Disney pass holder tickets. There was an annual purchase, which was costing millions of dollars to buy Disney tickets for all the employees of Reedy Creek. And they were under the employees where the wool was pulled over their eyes for all but the most senior members, who thought they were getting these magical Disney World tickets out of the goodness of Mickey Mouse's heart, out of Bob Iger's kindness. Well, no, it wasn't kindness. It was millions of dollars that was funneled back into Disney, no questions asked. This was a subsidizing of the company. And mind you, the parks segment has always been the most profitable segment for Disney. So it'll be very interesting what their returns look like without this accounting magic they were doing in Central Florida. That will no longer be able to happen under this new district. So I'm very interested in their financials as we look at them next year, because that's when we will really start to see them, coming out in the quarters ahead, where they're not going to be able to bury these line items, where these losses are really going to manifest themselves. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing that in the future. I think it's going to be absolutely, absolutely magical.
Because that brings us neatly onto the future of Disney, right? So they've gotten rid of the biggest threatening lawsuit, the one that could probably have ruined them, but that wouldn't have benefited Ron DeSantis of Florida either, because you'd prefer to keep Disney around. They are still a profitable venture for Florida, and if they can simply be brought under heel, then so much the better than destroying them. As Disney also announced a $60 billion reinvestment, and this isn't just in Disneyland, mind you, this is in far further parks and in their cruises as well, but still, $60 billion. That's going to be a lot of money going to Florida as well.
Yes, I know. I do think that $60 billion. So that number is a deceptive number. So let me expose that deception, because this is something I've done on my channel with others to do the financial side of this. The 60 billion is largely going to the commies. And by that, I mean China. Of that 60 billion, the vast majority is going to Xi Jinping in the form of Shanghai Disney. Also, I mean, you've got the Hong Kong assets as well, but that is now under the boot. And also going into cruises, which are primarily servicing the Chinese market. So cruise ships, for example. Now that 60 billion, it's very deceptive. It's earmarked for parks, cruises, and experiences. So cruises and cruise ships are a huge capital outlay that you spend over a very large period of time, 10 years, right? They have the 10-year investment plan. So you build out a ship over a very long period, a 5-10 year period. So a lot of that is deceptive because it involves cruises. However, a small smidgen of that, a droplet of that, is rumored to go towards the Magic Kingdom. And Bob Iger himself admitted that they could not build anything in his talking about the settlement. He actually said, this is, and I quote, and from the article talking about the segment, the Disney reveals more on huge Magic Kingdom expansion, that when there's a quote that says, the settlement, this is Iger's words, will actually enable us to pursue the kind of significant investment in our Florida parks that you're talking about. So he admitted that unless they settled, they couldn't build anything, which is what I was saying for a very, very long time, which was they cannot do anything in Florida without that settlement. Now they have it. Now, by the way, that does not mean they can automatically build it. They still have to go through all their approvals with the CFTOD. They have to get all of the building permits, all the other stuff. They have to do it in public now, which is the same process as Universal. And that is going to take some money and time, but they can actually have a shot at being approved of it, whereby while the lawsuit was pending, there's no way they would be approved because all the authority was up in the air, so that everything would have been stalled. So that's what's going on there. Now, mind you, that can all be magic and pixie dust. In fact, Disney is very well known for making big plans and not following through on them. One of the biggest things they pulled the pixie dust over everyone's eyes was the Epcot expansion, or rather the Epcot redo. They spent years trying to redo Epcot with wild visions of what was going to happen at Epcot. And what the reality was, after years of construction, was some shrubbery. I mean, a new ride-ish, but one or two new rides, but really not that much for how much time and oomph were put into it. And in fact, many of the things they said they were going to build, like a new conference center, they completely did not build at all. A new pavilion that they did not build at all. So while they're saying they're going to expand, Magic Kingdom, they're going to build beyond Big Thunder Mountain, they're going to expand to the rear of Big Thunder Mountain. Let's wait and see about that, because Disney has seen that they want to invest more in China, which, by the way, is insane, because I don't know if you knew this, Arch, but you don't actually own property in China. Were you familiar with that?
Well, yes, because you can't actually run any sort of company in China without it being run by a Chinese company. So whatever Disney builds there will not be Disney's.
Yes, they don't actually control it, and there's of course a party apparatchik on the holding company. So it's owned by a holding company, and that holding company has a member of the CCP on that board. And beyond that, they don't actually own the land. Every single piece of property in China is not owned in what we call fee simple ownership, which in the West is true property ownership. You own the land and all the rights of the land forever into your kin and heirs and assigns and et cetera, et cetera. No. They have a lease from the government. A government lease, which the government can revoke if they choose in their discretion to do at any time. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could. So at any point, if they wanted to revoke that, they could Because let's say they got into a tiff with America. Let's say America at some point, God forbid, they mention one of the few T's, right? So that being Tibet, Tiananmen, or Taiwan.
Yep.
Oh, no. U.S. does that. They crack down on U.S. companies and boom, snap of the fingers. It's now Commie-land instead of Disneyland. But yet they decide to invest more money in this, which is nuts.
Well, I imagine in part because they're getting a little bit desperate. Because one of the interesting things in the $60 expansion plan that I noted was that they say that earmarking the money now will be silly because they don't know what their next big attraction will be. That kind of makes sense, but it also highlights the fact that Disney doesn't really have a vision for the future. Disney doesn't really produce anything anymore, as you say, right? Their primary earners are their parks and cruise ships. So, but what about the Disney brand? What about their movies? What about their properties? Well, they haven't made anything new since Frozen, I suppose, would be their latest success. Disney is a company that survives almost exclusively off nostalgia at this point. And when that is your only income source, well, you need to reach as many nostalgic people as possible, and China is probably one of the largest gatherings of such potential customers. So Disney kind of just throws it in there, hopes to God that the Chinese government will allow them to do this at their, well, sheer mercy. I view it as either a complete Hail Mary of just pure hope rather than any grounding in reality, or possibly, China has had a history of influencing powerful people before, I guess.
Yes, and they absolutely are right now. There's the big backlash over here, and I say this sitting in Asia and actually talking with people doing business in China who are done with China because they've had their IP stolen. There's no recourse. There's only one person, Arch, you probably will never guess. There's only one person who has ever in the history of intellectual property rights won an intellectual property case against any Chinese corporation or the government, period, regarding theft of the IP. Do you have any idea who that might be, Arch, just out of curiosity?
No, please inform me.
It is Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan for
Really?
the production of fake Jordans, of fake sneakers, is the only person. And after spending millions in legal fees, he won approximately, I believe it was $20,000, which is a token, settlement there for the production of fake shoes. But largely, people have had their IP stolen, and they're done with it. They're saying we're done going to China and having them steal our IP. We want to work with countries that will actually enforce agreements, that when we send them a technology to make or produce, they don't just steal it, they don't just copy it, they actually will produce it and not steal and not produce counterfeit items and not use the exact same factory to produce the cheap Chinese knockoff brand. So this is what people are sick of, and this is why people are moving away from China, and then why the Chinese economy is largely actually kind of overhyped in a sense, because folks are not able to rely upon it, and they know they're not able to rely upon it. And increasingly, Xi is moving away from a free market economy and more towards a command economy, which for foreign investors makes them more and more wary. So it's a very interesting situation cozying up to China. Now, I will say the interesting thing is this, and I see this in Asia in general as well as in Tokyo. They play up the nostalgia, the old Disney, and they do their best to hide the new Disney. Arch, have you seen the posters for, let's say, the Star Wars films or for The Little Mermaid when the Little Mermaid remake came over to Asia? How there were some, let's say, strategic differences between the North American version and the Chinese version. Were you aware of that?
Yes, these were quite famous when it popped up at the time. Let's see if we can find out. There we go, a nice example where Finn grows a lot smaller on the Chinese version of the poster.
Yes, it's very much. Yeah, that was the best one, was because it's like Finn is just not there, right? because they know, hey, look, this DEI stuff really doesn't work in other countries. It doesn't stick because, I mean, you're not going to be able to push a narrative of the white exploitation of African Americans on ethnic Han Chinese. That doesn't really stick with them, right? So in trying that in most other countries just doesn't work. When you try to come over and say, well, this is all because of the white man, they just like look at you and they're like, well, we're not that, so please step over here. And this is why a lot of folks who worry about the expansion of DEI, DEI has largely now been called out, which frankly, self pat on the back and to yourself and many others, we've called this out for a very long time, and I think it's finally percolated into the wider discourse, which is, by the way, why they're trying to rebrand this as Bridge. That's another one of the programs that is similar to DEI. It's kind of DEI Part 2 that they're kind of trying to rebrand on. But they're aware of this. They're averting this, and they're not buying it. I mean, they're frankly not buying it in most other places that have a culture, that have a backbone. Even the commies aren't buying it. And it's backfiring on them. The amount of money they thought they were going to make in China is not showing up. Because when you air a movie in China, unlike the rest of the world, the rest of the box offices where you might take 50% of the global cut, well, in China, you're taking more like 20 to 25% maximum, because China is taking an additional cut. So the amount of profit you got by wooing China, by doing all of this filleting of Winnie the Pooh, this is something that is not as lucrative as they thought it would be, and has required much more bending of the knee than most people have thought is worthwhile. So that's why a lot of others are backing out of it, and it's very interesting to see Disney, at least in the park segment, trying to bend the knee there. Like you said, it may be because they're playing upon that nostalgia, but it's interesting how far that can go in a country in which the vast majority of people, still make under $100 a month. So it's very interesting play for Disney.
Yeah, I think it is simple desperation, because the company is struggling right now, not only after the settlement, but under a lengthy barrage of other lawsuits as well, amidst failing profitability. I mean, one of the highest profile ones is probably the Gina Corona lawsuit, which is being funded by Elon Musk, so she ain't gonna run out of money anytime soon.
Oh, yes. And that one is great because it's a sexual discrimination lawsuit against a corporation which alleged there was no sexual discrimination. And the best part of that one, the real thing that I say is, it's not whether Gina wins the case. Oh, no, 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 no. The best part of that one is, if we get discovery, we are going to get emails
Service guarantees
from
citizenship.
Kathleen Kennedy herself. Possibly if we got Iger stuff in there, Chapek emails in there, which go around talking about actively discriminating against Corona, actively trying to fire her for her political beliefs, and outing Disney as a political company, getting specific political agenda emails that are brought out to the world as part of Discovery. This would be devastating for Disney in a PR standpoint. There's no way they don't at least try to settle this case, because if this one goes to court, not only would it be insane because it could be televised, which would be nuts, but beyond that, it would expose so much of the internal workings of Disney that I think it would be a PR nightmare, a permanent black stain, in which would be so difficult for them to recover from. Because we all know it's going on. It's one thing for us to know it's going on. We all know what's going on. But it's a different thing to actually have the emails out there, and they would undoubtedly have to be mentioned in mainstream media. They would not be able to ignore it because it would just be so obvious, such a black eye. So this is something that I think the Gina Corona lawsuit, if it's not settled, has the potential to do catastrophic damage to the Walt Disney Company. And the beautiful thing about it, Arch, is Gina Carano should have been the strong, independent woman that they loved, that they just lapped up. But unfortunately, she does not share their insane political agenda.
That is true. Gina Corona is what Disney claims to be fighting for, and yet she was one of the first to be fired. And as you say too, this is almost certainly going to get settled, and this can work for a while, right? Because if Disney can simply just open their wallets and say, okay, here's 75,000 that you asked for, throw in another 75, go away. This can only last for so long, though, because I will also point out there's another class action lawsuit, also over sexual discrimination, the pay gap, with 9,000 employees. If you roll over and beg for mercy once, you can get away with it. Twice, sure. 3 times? At some point, people are just going to see you as a free meal.
Yes. And these are all, so one of them is a class action regarding the hotel maintenance workers. Another one is regarding their discrimination standards, their inclusion standards, which literally set quotas, racial pirating quotas. Mm-hmm. Which is nuts and is specifically illegal under U.S. law. And they put this out in an official document, which can only happen in a company where they have the sheer hubris of believing they will get away with violating what is a clear violation of the law. And I posted about this, but this matrix they had, this inclusion matrix, it is so bad. And the only concession they gave to their lawyers was to put a little tiny footnote at the bottom saying, well, this shouldn't be used in hiring or firing. But yet the main body of the document says you shall hire somebody who is diverse, right? You shall, not may, not must, not could, not prefer, shall. It is so blatantly discriminatory. And the real test is just replace the minority with white. And if it doesn't pass muster with the same language, it is under U.S. law discriminatory. If you would look at it and you would look at it as, okay, well, can we require they hire a white person for this role? No, of course not. That's illegal. Well, in the same way, you can't require them to hire somebody who is not white or who is quote unquote minority, whatever that means, by the way, because, you can splice and dice minority a lot of certain ways. I mean, for example, Asian Americans are often conveniently put into the white category for certain things, but other things they'll be put under POC when it benefits the agenda. Very, very interesting split there. But that said,
guarantees citizenship.
This is stuff that is on its face illegal to such a degree that there's not a lawyer out there who can say it's not. It's just a matter of, well, their heart was in the right place or something, which is possibly the only thing that anybody could ever say about it. But that's not a legal argument. That doesn't fly in court when you're blatantly being discriminatory, right? When you are on your face saying, nope, we're going to systemically go through and discriminate against people. And then, of course, the hotel worker lawsuit, the class action for the hotel maintenance workers, that's alleging labor violations, right? So workers were forced to pay for their own tools. And they were not paid the correct wage or the overtime rate. So they are owed a massive amount in back pay, I believe over $1 million in back pay, which is crazy, which is truly crazy. And the funny thing is, a lot of Disney workers, particularly the workers that, I've seen workers in Florida, they end up being so poorly paid. They're living in, essentially hovels, like these rundown motels and other places. They're having to pick up a second job because their Disney job does not pay them enough. It's absolutely disgusting what they hold themselves out as with their virtue signaling, but what they do on the other hand, it's nuts.
And just put a little bit of a cherry on top as well. There is also a lawsuit against Disney alleging discrimination and violation of pay and racial discrimination here against the blacks. So we've got racial discrimination against whites. We got racial discrimination against black. We got discrimination against women. Disney seems to be one of the most discriminatory organizations on earth.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And they're one that, I guess I could say they do it. The thing about Disney is they do it like, and then sprinkle that magical pixie dust on top of it, right? Like the issue is that they always are trying to reframe it, right? They're trying to make it into something that is, oh, we're doing something positive, right? When on the other hand, they're actually doing negative things. When this was very true during the protests, right? During the strikes, the Hollywood strikes. Now, we can all say, look, the Hollywood strikes were probably for the best, the writer's strike, the actor's strike, etc., right? I don't think people really missed out there. I mean, people ended up not watching stuff or realizing, hey, you know, I'm watching these Korean shows, then they're awesome and they're not stopped. People are still producing stuff in Korea, in Japan, right? Anime is still coming out. People were really turning to anime and other alternative forms of entertainment. And that just kind of hurt them. But Disney at the same time during these strikes was hypocritical enough to say, oh, we have all these values, we support workers and we support progressivism, but yet not be willing to pay their writers what they were demanding, right? So to virtue signal these progressive values, but yet not stand up and get behind them when it came to pay. So it's very interesting. Disney, especially when it comes to pay, they look like any other evil, quote unquote, right-wing corporation, just with this rainbow facade. Right? They've got the window dressing of the LGBTQA++ agenda. It's something they don't truly believe in, but they feel the need to virtue signal it because they feel it's in line with their prime demographic. Arch, have you heard about Disney adults and this segment of people called Disney adults?
I have not. What's that?
Okay, so I mean, you would imagine traditionally, right? Traditionally, what do you think Arch Disney's main market was, let's say 20 or 30 years ago? Who were they marketing to?
I mean, I'd imagine kids between 10 and 14, 15?
Yeah, and kids and their parents, of course, right? Because you'd want to market to the kids and the parents of small children, right? So the kids themselves, through the animation and through the parks and the accoutrement that goes along with that, saying, okay, you can bring your kids here. This will be a good experience for your kids and a comfortable experience for you as the parents of children. So they would cater more towards kids. They have completely shifted their marketing focus, entirely shifted their marketing focus. Disney specifically did not have alcohol at their Florida parks until about 10 years ago, except for with the exception of Epcot, which was always intended as a kind of special exception there. But with the exception of Epcot, they didn't have alcohol. But they decided that they are done marketing to children. They are now going to market to adult children. So now the primary market for Disney World and Disneyland as well, for the theme parks, particularly in America, is millennials, Gen Z, what they call Disney adults. So these are grown people. These are adults who are childless. So these are childless adults that probably had childhood memories of coming to Disney, right? They were brought to Disney as a kid. It is their quote unquote safe space, perhaps, right? They are perhaps delaying adulthood, delaying responsibility. They identify with the pixie dustish, ideas of that. And, while you can say there may be nothing wrong with a certain level of escapism, the issue for a company is this is a dead end. So what happens after this generation they're marketing to is gone? Well, they're childless adults. They don't have children. So that is a dead end. That is a closed door. So this has been their angle for the longest time. And this is why they've taken a largely progressive bent, because they looked at the demographics and they said, oh, well, these people are liberal. These people are left wing. So we're going to lean into these Disney adults because we think we can capture this market of left leaning, progressive leaning folks that are delaying responsibility and adulthood. Yeah, very, very interesting marketing choice, to say the least.
I would imagine it's almost in part due to the general decline of entertainment in and of itself, because I think this is actually a fairly common thing. the people who, like, who are the ones buying the $300 Stormtrooper helmets off eBay? It ain't 15-year-olds.
Right.
But, like, the problem is that Disney isn't producing anything for a new generation. Like, when I was growing up, we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Batman and Superman and all kinds of amazing shit. What do kids have now? Steven Universe?
Mm-hmm. And that's it. And Steven Universe and many other things were actually starting to be written more for the adults, right? They were written more and more for these adults, more and more targeted towards these adults that like childish things, which, look, I understand to a certain extent. I allow that, right? So I get that there's always going to be a secondary market. So you have your primary market and your secondary market. This is often something that comes out in anime and manga, right? So, for example, Japan acknowledges gender, so controversial, and says, okay, we divide our anime into, for example, shonen, which is primarily targeted at men, particularly young men, right? But you understand you can have a shonen manga, something like a One Piece or a Naruto, which is targeted at men, but women, as a secondary market, end up reading it and enjoying it. But the primary market is men, and they acknowledge that as part of their marketing. They say this is primarily marketed to this. It doesn't mean that nobody else can buy it. You're not banned from buying it because you have an XX chromosome. That's not something they check at the counter when you're buying your manga. But they're saying we're marketing it towards this. And Disney, by shifting that focus, is saying we're now going to market to this group primarily, is a material change and does mark a material change for them. But we've seen, as you said, they're creatively bankrupt. They're producing shows which are flopping, movies which are flopping. Even the Marvel series, which was their crown jewel, is now a laughingstock, is now producing empty theaters. We saw that with the Marvels. We've seen that with other IP, which is just having empty theater after empty theater. And they haven't given up yet. They still continue to produce these movies, which are flopping and flopping and flopping and flopping. And there's only so long that the spring of free corporate money can flow before people start asking questions, which was how we got into the whole fight with Nelson Peltzs and the proxy war with Disney, which has come to a little bit of a conclusion recently.
Well, we'll get into that definitely too in a second, but
sure.
I want to talk a little bit more about the entertainment part of it, because that is an interesting thought, isn't it? Because why aren't they producing new stuff? They're trying. The recent Elementals flop was one of those things, right? But why can't they make what they used to? And I think in part, you've kind of hit upon it there, that they're starting to aim it towards adults. And that wasn't the point. Like, the old Disney classics didn't become popular with adults today because they were aimed at adults then. It was because it had a primary audience and simply attempted to make the best product it could. And if you make a good product, then you will gain the primary market and also the secondary market by sheer virtue of being a good product. Right. Whereas if you try to make something aimed towards the current generation of adults, hyper-divisive, hyper-politicized, you're not going to make a good product, because a good product is more often than not a political one. The classic Western example, right? Every year, I make a joke lore video on my lore channel for My Little Pony, which is the exact opposite of 40K, which I usually cover.
I mean, I don't know. I think Slanesh might approve of My Little Pony. I'm just saying.
Possibly. And it has a massive adult audience, primarily because of it hit between the current year and the olden days, kind of, where it's this very simplistic cartoon for young girls that simply give basic, simple lessons, in the style of the old cartoons, but far more recent. And a lot of people gravitated towards that because of the fact that it was entertainment with a primary market, and thus gained a secondary market by an accident of being good at what it tried to do. Like, I think that's a very interesting point, actually, you struck upon there. Because, like, if you pursue quality, you are going to get add-on markets. But if you do not pursue quality, but instead pursue just the market, you end up with Disney, which hasn't had a hit since Frozen. How long?
Right.
God, how long has Frozen been out now?
Right, and even if you look at the embarrassing thing is you look at like the sequels, Frozen 2, for example. I mean, it has not come even near where the success of the first version is. And a lot of the ones that they had a first version to and came up with a sequel, just flopping. The live action redos flopping, becoming extremely controversial, brand damage. Rachel Ziegler. I mean, these are just nightmares for them. Pixar.
And I just looked it up. 2013. So Disney's last actual hit was now more than 10 years ago.
Correct.
There's the problem, isn't it? Like, if you just can't produce anything new, then all you can do is continuously to cannibalize your old properties, and that will only work so far.
Right. You can only do that for so long. And especially, here's the thing, when you are actively trying to rewrite them.
Yes. Like, that's the actual damage, too. Like, maybe The Little Mermaid can still be popular, but if you make The Little Black Mermaid...
Well, and once again, it's very interesting. For example, did you know, Arch, they're redoing Splash Mountain in it's almost done, actually. It will be open very soon in Disney World in Orlando. Did you know that?
I did not. What are they doing with it?
Okay, let me get you this. The reskin Splash Mountain. Okay, so they're actually they're not tearing it down. They're changing it into instead of it being Splash Mountain, which was based on Briar Rabbit and Song of the South, which, yes, controversial property. However, one of the most beloved IPs, particularly with the song Zippity Doo Dah, which everybody does know and is a very fine one. So they're replacing it with Tiana's Bayou Adventure.
Oh, fucking course they are.
Yes, and they've already gotten pretty far in reskinning it. So I'm trying to find the current progress.
I just saw like the splash thumbnail of the article, and it's like, yep, of course.
Yes,
obviously.
And so yes, obviously they're redoing it. So they've taken out all of the Song of the South stuff, and they're putting it in there to be Tiana's thing. The ironic thing is they're making it into like Tiana's the island that she's on. That island was actually a slave plantation, which actually is worse than Song of the South, which took place during Reconstruction. Despite never being out, Song of the South is not at all racist in any way, shape, or form. Anybody who's seen that movie, it's actually a fantastic movie about the Reconstruction period, which is a very important period in American history following the Civil War, where they were redoing things. But yes, this is now rethemed to Tiana. There's some very interesting looks at the animatronics, which look very Uncanny Valley-ish. But nobody gives a fuck about Tiana, right?
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I'm trying to think of the movie this person was in, and I swear to God, didn't it flop the Princess and the Frog? Was that one? Was the one? Yes. I thought that was like a huge flop, where the only good thing that came out of it was that one song, I've Got Friends on the Other Side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll look up the revenue again. But I mean, once again, did it make some money? It was largely a break even, because you got to understand, this, I believe, budget of $105 million, but that doesn't include its advertising and marketing costs, which is a very deceptive number, because often Disney spends, $50 million, $100 million on advertising and marketing, and in the box office, it brought under $271 million. So. Now, the box office, 50% of that money is going to go towards the theaters. So you got to cut that in half. So, okay, we're going to divide 271 by 2, right? Okay, it made a little over 100 million, and then you've got the advertising and the marketing costs, which are probably another 50 million, maybe. Probably break even, if not a loss. So these are the types of films they're relying on for their future, the ones that were the break even or loss leaders. This is the exact same thing that led to the devastation of Galaxy's Edge. Of course, you've heard of Galaxy's Edge, the Star Wars expansion. Arch, have you not?
I have indeed, and the beautiful thing that was the Star Cruiser.
Yes, this ingenious idea, which frankly, originally, I was actually on a panel at a convention when this concept came up, and I was of the mind, and I was proven wrong, and I will admit this, that I thought this was something that could infinitely print money off of nerds. I said, if you put people in a Star Destroyer, if you put them in the Millennium Falcon, if you put them even in a Carillion Corvette, right? The Tantive IV, right? You put him in any single, epic starship. You're going to print money. Just print it. Just put him in a spaceship. You're going to print money. And they decided to put him in a spaceship, except for it's one that nobody has heard of, not from canon, with none of the original characters, because Kathleen Kennedy went to Chapek and Iger and said, we need this to be the new series because the new series is going to be bigger and better, and it is the future. And it is not the old that is going to make us money, but the new. Little did they know that is exactly the opposite. The merch that is sold, the only merch that's sold other than Grogu, is the old stuff, right? Grogu is the exception, and once again, you come up with a cute character. That gimmick can buy you a little bit of time, but it's not something that is going to win in the future. They can't bank all of Grogu. They've milked the shit out of that little baby Yoda, and there's only so much that you can get out of a cute, one or two cute characters. That only goes so far. But it was a abysmal failure. The numbers they thought they were going to bring in, which they thought would be akin to Harry Potter world, have completely flopped. Because the difference between Universal and Disney is Universal embraced the original. They embraced putting you in the same scene from the movie and books. Versus Disney, which rejected that and said, no, we're going to put you in our weird woke version, which does not mirror the experience in the movies at all, other than having some of the new IP in there, having Rey in there, a character that objectively nobody likes.
Well, here's the thing, because I think you're entirely correct in that this could have been printing money like mad. Because if you gave people the Star Wars experience, and the old one specifically, then diehard fans would flock to it. I mean, even I, when it was being announced, I was kind of twitchy, like, that does sound really cool. But the problem is, they committed several grave mistakes. One was making it this halfway experience, where on the one hand, you aim it very much towards children, and at the other hand, you place the price tag at like $1,000 or something. No fucking child's gonna pay for this.
Yes.
And so you're necessarily appealing primarily to the adults. And the adults aren't going to be there for the child experience, and the children aren't going to be there for the adult experience. And then you further compound this divide of focus by making it a very small hotel. Like, it couldn't have that many people in it. If you made this into a larger attraction with maybe like 1,000 visitors, then that'd be something. But you focus very heavily on the idea that this very small group of very monetarily solid and financially secure people will not only visit, but will visit again and again and again. And I've seen pictures from inside, like the rooms, etc., tiny little sad rooms, tiny little sad menus, and so on. It's like, I don't imagine there's going to be a whole lot of repeat visitors, and especially not at that price tag. And voila, that turned out to be true.
Oh, absolutely, 100% true.
Service guarantees citizenship.
You could get money if you angled it towards specific adults. Like I said, if you angled it towards people that wanted to, and you could even charge more if it was very small, very high ticket number for something like staying in the Millennium Falcon, staying in an accurate version of Millennium Falcon. You could charge a bunch of money for that. You could do that. That's not what they ended up doing, though. And that's the whole issue, is that they never ended up doing the things that would have made them that money by committing to that theme, right? There's and look, as you know, I mean, of course, this is very true in 40K, right? The hardcore fans, the hardcore folks that are really into it, do drive a lot of sales, right? So
Absolutely.
The people that are the most dedicated end up in a hobby, end up investing a wild amount, but they actually rejected those people. And the worst thing is, Arch, they do what they do in many other fandoms. They called them out and they shamed them. They shamed the fans for being fans. They shamed the fans for loving the old characters. They shamed them for being who they were, which perverted the entire thing. It tainted the entire pool and market. There's a reason why Star Wars, which used to be the most just massive merch printer out there, it was this infinite
Service
merch,
guarantees citizenship.
printing machine. It's selling nothing. These new action figures, if they're even being made at all, the famous Rose Ticos that are on the discount aisles, that are going to these bargain bin stores, because nobody wants to buy these characters. Nobody wants to buy the merch, and they don't want to produce the old stuff. They simply don't want to do it.
Yeah, and it's, again, because what they're producing now just isn't good. And they are, worse yet, they are pissing all over what came before. Like, the entire idea of not only replacing Luke with Rey, but killing Luke. It's like, oh god, it is literally wringing the neck of the golden goose, and then starting to wonder, why isn't it laying any eggs anymore? I just don't understand.
And just wait for the Acolyte and the new movies coming out. The Obaid Chinoy, Charmin Obaid Chinoy, who's the famous quote of "I like to make men uncomfortable." Just wait for that movie, and this new series that's coming out, which is headed by a bunch of folks which are blatantly misandrist and let's say bigoted against certain peoples. Yeah, this should be more wild failures in the Disney Star Wars realm. So it's only going to keep getting worse. But frankly, to me, I love it because it pushes people towards away from Disney, and it pushes them away from them permanently. I've long viewed Star Wars as dead. As someone who loves Star Wars, I view as what is being put out now is not Star Wars. The original is always it for me, and it'll never be anything beyond that. In the original books I used to read, the expanded universe, the Timothy Zahn books, I just end it there. I say the rest is just not Star Wars. It's just not, to me, what it was, what it's about. And I've accepted the fact that I'm not going to see, in my lifetime, until I'm very old, not going to see anything that comes back and turns the ship. And even then, there's going to be a lot they need to retcon to try to make it right. It's very, very, very sad, but it also pushes you towards things like anime, right? Things like alternative studios, things like independent studios. These are gaining traction, and I think that's a good thing.
Absolutely. And this is because of their political ideas as well. So as we move on to the Nelson Peltzs thing too, I wanted to bring this one up. This appeared during the annual earnings call when they were voting over getting new people on the board of directors.
Yes.
This is a woman, Chloe Cole, states that not only did Disney pay for her transition, which is wild, why the fuck is a company going like, oh yeah, you wanna mutilate your genitalia? Yeah, we'll pick up the bill for that.
Yes.
But then also, after transitioning her with minimal counsel, when she realized, oh, well, this was a mistake. This was a terrible idea. What does Disney do? Closes the door, shuts down the phone lines. Like, well, we didn't know anything about this. Now you're being harmful to us.
Yes. And this makes no sense to me. And actually, this is one of the good things this is one of the interesting things that is going to end up in a huge lawsuit for them, because this is blatantly discriminatory. If they're going to pay for quote unquote transitioning from one to the other, well, then they've got to pay from one back, because that same logic holds true, right? If you truly are believing that someone can, move between genders as fluidly as water, moves from, high tide to low tide and back again, if you truly believe in this concept, then you've got to pay for it both ways. You can't just pay for it one way. Of course, this was a giant virtue signal. It's not yet mandated in the US yet, that companies' medical benefits cover transitioning. That's not mandatory in our country yet. However, companies can elect to cover that. And the Walt Disney Company does elect to cover, quote unquote, gender dysphoria transitioning, right? So this is something where they're saying, okay, we're going to transition you over, but yet they're not providing it the other way. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't actually work. So there's going to end up being a lot of lawsuits on this. And this is one of the more complicated things about the trans, issues when it comes to, healthcare and other things they may deem, and of course, some folks, and I've had a lot of folks, even people that are trans, reach out and say, I see the illogic here. And this is where the lawsuits come. This is where the lawsuits come, because when you do something, if you're going to do it, it's got to be equal across the board. And this is where so many people get in trouble, because what they're doing is clearly not even-handed. And this is the truth of the political left and the modern progressive American narrative, is they don't want equality. They want quote unquote equity, which says, well, there's too many straight people, so we have to even the odds the other way, right? We've got to make sure that they're all transitioning. So that's where we've got to go with this, because we've got to push this. We've got to push this in one direction, because it's not equitable, right? Which is preposterous, right? That is absolutely preposterous. It's one thing to say, okay, well, when you're making a hiring decision, you can't use that as a criteria whether or not to hire or fire somebody. Okay, that's one thing. But it's quite the other thing to say, well, we're going to pay for you to mutilate your genitals in one way, but not another, right? That's questionable under the law.
Not to mention as well, the entire idea that this is supposed to be healthcare, I think is something that in a couple of decades' time will probably be viewed as utterly barbaric. Because this isn't a question of you have a rotten tooth or anything. This is straight up mutilation. I know it's technically not supposed to say that on YouTube,
and to be clear, Arch, and this is actually for Miss Cole, because you brought up Chloe Cole, she was specifically mutilated as a child, right? And I use that word specifically because she was a child. She was 16 years old when she had a double mastectomy, right? Yes. And was put on puberty blockers, right? And this does permanent damage to an individual when they go down that route. It's one thing if you do it as an adult, which, look, everybody who's an adult can do what they want with their body. That is their own prerogative. But when you are a 16-year-old, there are other considerations, and your body is also at a certain point where stuff like that can be irreparable damage. So there's real issues when people are supporting that at younger ages. I think there's actual questions. I mean, these children don't have the capacity to buy cigarettes, to buy tobacco, to drink, to gamble, to buy pornography, but yet they can do these things. They're given the agency to give themselves these life-altering surgeries and put themselves in these life-altering drugs. I think that is true insanity. Because it is something that has such a permanent effect.
Absolutely. Like the entire point of transitioning is a complicated one. Like, my belief is simple. If you're an adult, then you still need to go through a year of mandatory counseling, because it is that severe. And after a year of psychological help, if you still feel the need, then okay, that is your freedom. But again, like you say, a 16-year-old kid, we don't allow her to partake in significant portions of society at that point, but we will allow them to undergo puberty blockers and things that can, and in this case have, permanently damaged their bodies. It's absurd, and for this to be done by a company is ludicrous. I mean, especially considering here as well, the lawsuit here could easily allege that Disney Corporation has, in essence, destroyed this person's quality of life. The lawsuit here alone should be for millions.
Yes, this, and especially if they can find other individuals that are in similar situations, this could be a class action that is multi-millions, and and even potentially larger. It should be a massive thing, and the fact that not enough people are talking about this is insanity. It is absolutely crazy, because this is our future, the future of the country, the future of the nation, and also the future of where corporate America is going. If this is what corporate America is supporting, we're in a lot of trouble. We're in a whole lot of trouble. And once again, we don't give children agency to do a lot of things, and we also still hold their parents responsible. So at a certain time, you're giving the agency to make these decisions, but yet, a 16-year-old is still under the responsibility of their parents. So you're kind of removing this decision from the parents, but yet still giving them responsibility. So you're literally giving them responsibility with no authority. And when you put people in that scenario, they walk away. And when I talk about the destruction of the American family, it has been death by 1,000 cuts, because the authority of the American family over even their own children has been taken away.
Absolutely. And this then finally feeds into the idea of the political ideology, because this is absolutely a political ideology. Where very recently there was an attempt by Nelson Peltzs and Trian is his company. Trian. Yes, to get people on the board of directors of Disney. This did not go through this time around, but I very much so think that this is going to be attempted multiple times, because apparently, just like with a drug addict, Disney cannot be salvaged before it hits rock bottom, I guess.
Yeah, and the thing is that these sort of things can be attempted year after year after year. So
yes,
this proxy battle actually was one that was threatened last year, and they backed down on it. But here's the thing. Bob Iger's now made a bunch of promises. He's got to follow through on them. If he doesn't follow through on them, he's just going to face us again next year, and the year after, and the year after that, and the year after that. And the fact that a lot of people are taking a victory lap on the fact that Iger won, quote unquote won, right? But it's a black eye for a company to even have a significant shareholder raise these sort of issues, to bring this sort of fight. The fact that this sort of fight was brought in the first place is hugely damaging. By the way, their stock is going to drop and continuing to drop. This is not financial advice. This is just an observation, because it was pumping due to the proxy battle itself. When there's a proxy battle, there's buying up of stock. That is a time when a stock generally appreciates, right? And, we've seen, post this drop off, or post this event, we've seen it drop in price. So it kind of spiked back down and has entered a kind of a downward trend following this the end of this proxy battle. So it should be very interesting where this goes. But now Iger will be held to task now that he's quote unquote won. Right. So once again, what is a win? Right. Even if Peltz had won, that doesn't mean the company would have been changed. They would have only had 2 board seats, and they could have been easily outvoted. But instead, with this quote unquote loss, now Bob Iger is fully responsible for everything that goes on in the Walt Disney Corporation. So if anything goes wrong, it is 100% on Bob Iger.
Yep. And there's a very, 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 very small percentage chance that he is going to be able to rectify this in the immediate future. The parks will still continue to do well, presumably, as will the cruises, presumably. Although, now that they can no longer hand out free tickets to them...
Yeah, that's going to hurt them. But also But also, Arch, there's a bigger thing with Disney, and this is something that the folks
Service
that, and
guarantees
I've been
citizenship.
covering this pretty closely and covering Disney very closely, not just in the legal aspect, but the business aspects as well. Disney has moved their marketing. So not just to Disney adults, but they've moved to this like premium experience, right? So you kind of see this with a lot of marketing to millennials. So what the marketing to millennials, and I'm not sure if this is like this in Scandinavia as well, but typically they try to make it kind of, as we'd say, bougie, or kind of that like, it's this quasi nice experience. So what they've done is they've hiked up the prices. So they've essentially priced out families. So to bring a family of 4 or family of 5 to Disney has become prohibitively expensive. Whereas they're saying, okay, well, we're not marketing for this. We're marketing for this single childless adult who can spend more disposable income on the parks, and we're going to really push it on them. So they've hiked the price point up. So they've actually priced people out of Disney, which is a very interesting move. Priced the families particularly out of Disney.
Presumably, it is another act of pseudo-desperation, I guess. The need to get more money to cover losses in other areas, especially as Star Wars... I mean, that should have been an investment that should have paid itself back 15 times over in merchandise sales alone. And then there's Marvel also, which has been failing now for years, because in essence, after the original series of movies that eventually culminated in the Avengers, etc., they haven't really been able to utilize Marvel either, despite there being a lot of useful things in Marvel that they can still benefit from. Instead, they're still focusing on Miss Marvel going forward.
Well, yeah, and if you look at the Phase 4 characters, right? So I mean, like you mentioned, Miss Marvel, right, and the ones in Phase 4, they're people that nobody is excited about, right? Who they're leading with, the people they're showing here and they're putting out, nobody gives a shit about them. Nobody cares about them. Nobody's showing up to them. The fact that they have to bring back some other characters is kind of sad to try to dredge up interest. Because they know that people simply aren't interested in these versions. Also, they've kind of killed certain characters, even characters which were cool when they were there in the beginning. I'll bring up Loki, for example. They went in kind of, they take their male characters and they emasculate them. They make them into something else. They weaken them. They soften them. What happened with Thor and Fat Thor. They take these characters and they absolutely murder them. And what we're seeing now with Marvel is what happens when you destroy your own IP. When you have something that was big, and it was big under Marvel, like they did make it big, and then they went and committed seppuku because they were committed to this slow bleeding in of the DEI agenda till all you had was diversity, right? Where, there is a cast which does not reflect America. Because if you look at the demographics of America, right, it certainly is not reflected in who they're putting up there, right? They're not putting up folks that represent in a proportion, right, that represents America, right? That's not what you're doing. And if that's what you wanted to do, that might be admirable, but that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to push a percentage of the population, or represent a percent of the population, which is and overrepresent them. Because that is what equity demands, right? Equity demands that a certain percentage of the population be overrepresented to correct for previous wrongs, right? So when 73% of people, are in one category, right? That means that, okay, well, we're not going to show the 73%. We're going to show the 15%. And we're going to represent that 15%, in fact, represents 80 or 90% of America, which is just not true, which is simply not true.
Yep. I mean, the worst part is, too, like, there are potentials for new heroes in the Marvel universe here, too. Like, the Fantastic Four's always been a little bit of a B team, but it's an old classic, at least. You could do something with that. Spider-Man, you could always do something with that, even if it is Miles Morales, I guess. But most of this Wasp, Ant-Man, Captain Marvel, Black Widow. It's just not exciting. Yeah. And they failed to build any of this up, too, because what you really needed to do was to use the original set to kind of launch these new characters in the same way that they used to do with the comic books, in essence. But for one reason or another, they treated all of their primary actors so poorly that they've all said that they want to do it. Captain America doesn't want to play the role anymore. Iron Man doesn't want to play the role anymore. Thor's an action hero now. He doesn't give a shit. You don't have any meat on the bone anymore.
And you've done enough where you've actually tricked the audience. You've lied to the audience. Like, for example, having the movie that was supposed to be a Doctor Strange movie, but Doctor Strange isn't even in it, right? This is the new thing that Hollywood is doing, where they'll pitch you on one thing. I think the He-Man movie was famous for this.
Oh yes.
Where it was it's a He-Man movie. You expect to see He-Man, and it's not about He-Man at all. It's about the other character. And so when you have an Ant-Man movie that's really about the Wasp, and I see that the Wasp movie over there, but I mean, when you're pushing these other characters that effectively become the main character, particularly through one or two ways. One could be screen time, and the other could be the total emasculation of the character. So you've got the character is typically a male character, for example, Ant-Man, but he's completely emasculated by the female characters, by the supporting cast, by the others, right? He's completely relegated to a buffoon, right? This has been made happen over and over again. And the actors, like you said, they don't want to play these characters anymore because they don't want to be emasculated. They're saying, no, I'm not going to play that character because I don't want to be effectively in a cinematographic way cuckolded, almost out of the role, right? They signed up for a role and they're not being able to play that role. It's inherently wrong at what they're doing to these actors, because they're inducing them in and then flipping the script on them.
Absolutely. Disney is simply just running out of social capital and fiscal capital.
And fiscal capital, because people no longer want to fund these movies. So the big thing was the DEI money was flowing back in the day. But from what I've heard, and I actually had the conversation with a gentleman, this was actually last week, who is a very big insider to Wall Street. And we were talking a lot about DEI because, we had a debate. He's very bullish on certain companies in the US, and I just was pushing him on that. And he said straight up, he said, the companies, they may not say it publicly, but a lot of them have got, now Disney's not one of them, but a lot of the companies on the funding side have gotten the memo that DEI is not making money, is not selling. So they're no longer going to be giving money the same way to these movies anymore going forward, right? They're not going to get the same level of funding where they don't question. That pump is drying up. The amount of money they have for these movies to infinitely tap into this DEI market is drying up because they want a return, right? They want a return on their investment, and they're not getting that.
Yep. You can only keep taking this money for so long. Especially as, again, the reason why we got the DEA stuff in the beginning was because it was supposed to be a more ethical form of investment. And ethical investment is all good and well so long as you've got lots of money and money's easy to come by. It ain't so easy no more.
Exactly. And it's all fun and games when you're printing a bunch of money and, when there's pandemic bucks being handed out to whoever. It's all fine and good, but now we're not in that era anymore. We're in people are getting fired right now. Companies are slimming down. They're firing folks, and we're seeing great pushback, not just in the movies segment, but I mean, even now with pushback in the game segment, we're dealing with the, quote unquote Gamergate 2 with, all that's going on with pushing back against Sweet Baby Inc. and, this sort of thing in games as well as movies. And I think Americans are getting knowledgeable about it, and they're tired of it. They don't want this anymore. And they're pushing back in all forms of media against this sort of injection into what they're consuming, and they're not going to be silenced anymore, right? The defense of you are all a bunch of racist, bigoted people is failing because there are people who are minorities speaking up. There's women speaking up against this and saying we're tired of this bullshit. Like even we don't want to see this crap, and they just can't silence it anymore, right? The same tired old rubric of you are racist, you are sexist, you are misogynist. You are Yahtzees. That's just not working as effectively anymore because they've overused it. They've overplayed it.
They have. I think Disney is in for some hard times ahead, and I kind of hope that it might break them. Just a little bit.
It could with all of these lawsuits. I mean, you have the Stephen Miller one pulled up here. With the unlawful discrimination. I mean, they've got so many lawsuits that what I said is it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's the aggregate, right? They have the money to pay for these lawsuits individually, but it's the PR damage. It's the brand damage of saying lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit, having to disclose them, having to talk about them during earnings calls. This is kryptonite for a company because it weighs them down. They cannot escape this burden, this gravity, and it's just pulling them and sucking them down. And they keep stepping in it, and they keep going deeper into the quagmire instead of taking the hand up. They could have easily worked with Peltz. They could easily work with people that want to genuinely help them. In fact, the most vociferous opponents, even myself included, I grew up with fond memories of Disney. One of the reasons why I covered it is because I went to Disney as a child. I'm a Floridian. I grew up with fond memories of Disney. But the Disney I liked and enjoyed was the Disney of Walt Disney, who was incredibly based, by the way. And very non-commie pilled. He was very much pro-America, and that's not what you have in the modern Disney. The modern Disney could not be further from Walt than anything else. It's the absolute perversion of what was Walt's dream, what was his initiatives and his priorities for this country and for the company.
Absolutely. Maybe it will resurrect itself. Maybe it will reform itself. Maybe it will not.
Maybe it's possible. I think there's a phoenix that could rise from the ashes, and there's a lot of different possibilities. For example, I've always said I would love the day when the parks split off from the entertainment section. I think that could be the best thing ever if the parks just were spun off into their own thing, and they could be spun off along with the cruises and other experiences, and they could have licenses to use the IP for as long as time exists. But that said, tying themselves to this agenda because they feel they're creating media and they need to tie themselves to it, it's damning them in the long run. It's also cutting them off from 50% of America and 50% of the world, really, if they're alienating themselves from, anybody who holds any belief that is pro-family, pro nationalism at all, right? Even having a shred of pride in your country instead of tearing it down, right? If you're against just generally the family, that's not a good stance. It's not great, and it's not a pro-future stance.
I don't think so either. Right, let's move on to some super chats then. I guess we've talked about the major topics. Let's see if YouTube is willing to load things today.
Maybe. The gods are willing.
Holznater, Arch, you and Ranks should form one party, and V and Dev should form another, and have concurrent campaigns working for opposing factions. Ah, the drama of the D&D campaign.
Love it.
Rangi has been a member for 13 months. Thank you very much, sir. Great. English is difficult language sometimes, apparently. Great seeing legal-minded here. Arch, you two seem like you would get along. Maybe you should invite him back next time you're talking VTubers, too.
Ah, yes, excellent. Yeah, I've loved my coverage of VTubers. It's been great. The legally minded comment is intended to piss me off, but I am restraining my anger right now. But yeah, it's been great covering that. And once again, it's really interesting. I've said this once, I'll say it again. VTubing, one of the reasons for the rise in VTubing is because Western media has failed. And the biggest rise in VTubing and the way it's taken off is in the English-speaking market. So what does that connote? That connotes the failure of English-speaking media to entertain people in the West. And so in that gap, comes anime, manga, and VTubing. VTubing is a natural secondary market for people who enjoy anime, right? And that has been a massively growing market. Things like movies like Demon Slayer, for example, are killing it compared to Pixar, are just murdering it in the box office. So you can see that the East is remaining profitable, and there are these wildly profitable venues. VTubing as an industry is growing 30% a year. In Disney's wildest dreams, they could not grow 30% a year. They have negative growth in many cases. It is absolutely pathetic when you compare that to the industry on the other side. So yeah, there's a lot of growth, I think, in the future for that industry.
Yep. If there's nothing in the West willing to entertain, then somebody else will move in and do it instead.
Absolutely.
Reverend Norse, a crossover I did not expect, but a welcome one. Don't worry, you are both based, so just cut loose and enlighten and entertain us. Rat bricks and paralegal monkeys unite.
Shout out to the paralegal monkeys.
Why you hating says, Arch, your April Fool's video was hilarious. Thank you. Lord of the Possums has been a member for 16 months. Says, hi Arch. Hello Possums. Thank you for your long-term support as well. LCPL Anime Guy. Hey LM and Arch. Love you guys. Stuff. Keep it up.
Awesome. Thank you.
And he also says, with all this happening, I'm wondering when Disney was going to get their own army like Shinra Power Company. If I was the DI, I'd whip security into shape.
Yeah, they only wish they could be Shinra. They really do. Like, once again, I can respect a corporation if it's doing corporation things and doing like some like evil corporation things, but do it competently, right? Like invest in the right things. Like if they were making a Mako cannon or a Mako cannon, I could respect that. But no. Instead, we have weird projects and remaking Splash Mountain into something nobody asked for, which objectively failed at the box office.
Mark the shame. Henceforth, April 5th shall be known as Arch Was Wrong Day. Yes. One of my few errors. I actually genuinely thought for a second that the Society of Magical Negroes might be a return to the age of like racial comedy, where everyone can take the piss out of each other.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
That's
no.
not what happened.
That's not what happened indeed. Because I thought, okay, black people have magical powers, and they need to guide, like, white people to do things. All right, you could make some funny scenarios out of that, like, explain colonialism, I guess. Like, black people in Africa looked up at us like, wow, the white people are suffering. We must help them. Then they help us a little bit too much, and then they have to deal with the consequences. You can make something funny out of that. But no, instead it's just like, oh, I'm so abused.
It had so much potential, but they decided to go the woke route with it.
Yeah, instead you have a guy there who's whinging like, oh, nothing good ever happens to me, says the magical wizard who has the first hot girl he comes across, fall madly in love with him instantly. Like, yeah, your life is hard. Marksman 517B says, hello, LM, have you heard about syntax, have you heard about Amazon's DEI AI?
I've heard vaguely about it, but I need to know more details. I mean, have you heard about this, Arch? I haven't gotten enough details.
Well, Amazon is currently developing several AIs after they managed to destroy their own AI. Because they were working on an AI for themselves, like everyone is doing now. But the person they put in charge of developing the Amazon AI referred to herself as an expert in DEI AI. So they were trying to teach it diversity, equity, and inclusion before anything else. This ended up with so many contradictions that they fatally poisoned the AI model until the point where it actively bricked itself and the entire project was abandoned.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yes, and so now Amazon has gone the completely opposite route. Now they are giving out contracts to like 24 different AI companies, basically hoping that somebody else will be able to give AI what Amazon could not give themselves. So they tried giving it to the DEI professionals, and now they're trying to give it to the actual professionals. Let's see which one works out best, I guess.
Yeah, I think it'll work better with actual professionals. But they call that me. Maybe I'm crazy, right?
And CPL Anime Guy, wait, Disney is anti-military? Wow, that's scummy. Are they?
Yes.
Oh, that
was one of the very problematic facts, which, I always, when I first learned about that one really bothered me, to be honest. The one where they were blocking the veterans access. It was absolutely reprehensible, frankly.
Boog says, finally get to see you two together talking Disney. Any thoughts on Disney buying up anime production seats to spread the message? Also, favorite pony. Of course, Boog. You might have seen this. A lot of companies have begun to move into Japan, with DC being one of the recent ones with the Suicide Squad Isekai.
Yeah, I saw the Suicide Squad Isekai. I'm gonna say this: it's not gonna work, right? So, the problem is they're trying to co-opt the stuff, and I know a lot of people worry about it, but as someone who lives in Asia, I can just say, look, it's just not gonna work. What they're trying to do, when you go and make a woke anime, right? People just aren't gonna watch that, particularly the anime community, because the anime community is very active in talking about what is good and not good, and what is watchable and what is cringe, and it's just not going to be successful. There's not much more to say about it, really. It's just this is not going to work, right? Objectively, people will not go for this. It's not what people want to see. It's not what people will pay money for, period. So, when people, I know they're going to try to buy it out. I know they're going to try to do more anime stuff. And I understand that. And people are very, very afraid of quote unquote Japan going woke. But it's just not something that can practically happen because, well, they don't have that same woke culture, right? The things that make woke, quote unquote, work, to the extent that you can even argue it works at all, I would argue it does not work at all, period. But to the extent that might be an argument, that just doesn't fly in Japan. It's just these factors are not there. You can't say, oh, well, when you go to Japan and you start talking about equity, they literally don't give a shit. This country is in the middle of a very, very nationalistic turn, actually. Right now, politically, the party that's gaining a lot of favor is actually the anti-immigrant party, right? Which is against immigration in Japan. And mind you, this is a country that has less than 2%, I believe, or 3% of immigration. So they already barely have any immigrants, and they're not even happy with that. So I don't see it taking over Japan. I don't see it taking over anime. I don't see it replacing anime, because the Japanese have said too, they'll produce manga and anime just for the Japanese. And so long as there's anime and manga being produced just for the Japanese, there will be translations of that to English. Same thing with Korea, by the way, other places as well, right? As long as they are producing for their domestic market, there's nothing Hollywood can do. And they're never going to change that because of the language barrier. So I'm not as worried about Japan as I think some other people are. I think a lot of people are very much in the scare tactics about Japan, but I'm very much not as worried. Now, that doesn't mean it shouldn't be opposed, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't speak against it. But I just want to make that clear, because I thought perhaps your audience hadn't heard that rant from me before. Very passionate about that one.
The key will be if they simply give some of the Western properties over to Japan and let them do them in the Japanese way, it could work. If they simply hand over Harley Quinn, goes hey, make an anime out of it, no creative input from us, no control, go crazy, I can see it being a cool product that might actually revitalize some of these old characters by giving them a breath of fresh air. But if they decide to simply try to make Western entertainment but with a Japanese skin suit, it will be received exactly the same way as everything else, as more woke nonsense.
Yes, I agree.
CGI Lantern. Disney, after losing the lease on the solar panel farm, tear it down. It infringes Mickey Mouse copyright. Florida man. Based after Steamboat Willie.
Yes.
NJ Gamer. Legal Mindset and Arch. Did the FBI label games are terrorists? Label games are...
I think there has been that talk, and this is of course the FBI has gone after a lot of people, but I think there was like discussion of gamers as potential extremists.
Yes,
I do believe that
in
was
fact. There was a recent attempt via the DHS, which was yeeted from the internet very quickly. There's also been several think tank papers produced in the European Union, of course, about how extremists use the gaming milieu, etc. But
of course, the EU would put that out. Of course.
Heresy's the question.
But
Fire
nothing
is the answer.
solid or concrete has been made of it so far. So I guess this is one of those shady conspiracy we'll only know about after it's happened.
Right. It's a when they arrest everybody who plays Helldivers sort of situation.
Yep. McCall11, because of their rapey mentality, Disney in Florida cannot erect even a Mickey without governor consent. Next, they should be required to inform neighbors that they are convicted predators.
Yeah, that's actually true. They cannot build anything without consent now. So that is a huge win for Florida. So there's a lot of folks with this settlement agreement were trying to frame it as a Iger win, and Iger framed it as a win-win. It is not. It is actually a huge Disney L. They just don't want to admit it, and Disney is very good at spin, and they've been very good at spinning this thing as a win for them. Whereas, I mean, yes, they did get a minor concession regarding those mitigation credits, and I hope everybody can understand that now that I've explained it. It was a minor concession, but overall, it's an L. They did not want this. They wanted to maintain their absolute power, which is the only way they could maintain those illegal benefits into the future. But they've lost that now. So they've lost their main grift, their main instrument of graft.
Yep. It is absolutely an Iger surrender, more so than it's in any sort of a win. Because they've basically given in to everything and only gained minor concessions in return.
Yes, correct.
Mechanics on Duty says, gratuity for no
Service
dev.
guarantees citizenship.
Poor dev. My usual co-host is off doing things with his female partner today. As we all know, they are the real bosses.
Indeed.
A guy under a bridge. Wait for Disney to, ironically, I guess unironically, hold a yard sale.
Yeah, it might happen.
I mean, hell, there would really be a collector's opportunity, I guess.
Yeah, especially if they're doing a yard sale on their IP. I mean, that's, yeah.
Zito says, legal mindset, a true man of culture. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Yes. It's a crazy world that I live in, but I'm so happy I get to collaborate with people on topics I really care about. You know, gaming, anime, cultural stuff, media. Like this has been fantastic for me. I frankly, when I first got on the internet, I thought I'd be talking about boring law shit all the time. But you know, I've expanded in terms of what I've talked about, and I couldn't be happier doing it.
It's a pretty great job, I must say.
Yeah. Despite what Hassan says.
I did see that. He was complaining about his
answer.
It's like, it's so hard being a streamer. Shut the fuck up.
I'm sorry, Hassan. You started responding to people and then directly, and then people started to realize that you were a retard. What can I say? It's a harsh world for the mentally inept. Toga the White. What the heck, Andrew? No locals chat link? Breaded?
This is not my stream, guys. This is Arch's stream. So, yeah, I only make local streams for my own.
Read Fox Media. Howdy, Arch and Mindset. I was watching FNT. They say how important film, comics, etc. are, then say get a real job like burger flipping about writers who are out of work. Seems hypocritical. Part 1, yes. I'm guessing. So part 2 is, I feel it should be about writers sucking at their job rather than the legitimacy of the job. I didn't think any of them would have told Stan Lee that. He was good at what he did, so paid him for it.
Yes.
Well, this is the thing. I think that a large part of the problem that we're facing today is because the things we like became popular. Like gaming became popular, geek culture became popular, and so a lot of people wanted to work in that. Because before, there was a very natural, like, filtration system. Only people who were really into science fiction would even attempt to write science fiction as a living, right?
Right.
Whereas now, 3 years of community college, and you're a writer, I guess.
Well, and not only that, but it's cool to be it's in vogue to be the nerdy girl, the geek, whatever, right? So like, when it went into vogue, when superheroes became cool, right? When that was a big turning point. That was a big shifting point, because all of a sudden you see people coming out of the woodwork that frankly didn't give a crap about this at all before, but suddenly are the biggest fans ever. And you got the tourists, right? And I think you've talked about this. You've probably had the best conversation, I think, on gatekeeping and the importance of it. And I mean, I can't stress enough, like, the tourists are what ends up ruining everything. And when you look into these folks, when you really look into who they are, the people that are ruining your media, whether it's movies, whether it's games, etc., it's always people that are effectively tourists.
Yep. And a lot of this decline in quality is because they don't give as much of a shit. And that will eventually just start seeing a general precipitous decline of the industry, which will only increase in pace as AI becomes better. Like, the moment an AI becomes able to write a coherent script is the moment that about 90% of script writers in Hollywood are probably fired, with only the true professionals and the passionate people remaining.
Yeah, and they'll be managing AI, right? So like, their job will be to manage the AI, right? They'll still be a guy, but like, the guy will be just the person who like filters through the AI stuff and picks the best AI made, information, right? So, I mean, that's a job. It is a job, but it's not the job they thought they were hired for.
Why Hayton says, why did investors back Bob with all this? Promises. A lot of promises.
Well, and also they the big institutional investors, so we're talking the Vanguards, etc., they do value stability. And so they probably thought, okay, we're not yet at that point of wanting to overturn this. But an interesting fact here was you had a big institutional, State Street, which is a massive institutional, which owns a lot of Disney shares. They actually abstained from voting, which is a very interesting signal. It's a signal that they didn't necessarily disapprove. While they didn't approve maybe of Peltz, and they didn't want to openly back him, they didn't approve of Bob and his slate. Very interesting, subtle signal there, but I think these subtle signals, they send a larger message. So I think there is Bob doing his little apology tour, his explanation tour afterwards, that was necessary damage control based on the damage that was done. That was not so much a victory lap as damage control.
Yep. So it might very well be that this was in large part a sign to Bob Iger that you've got 1 or 2 more years and then you're out. So he's better. You've
got to get your shit. Yeah, you've got to get your shit together, because when he tries it again, if Bob Iger fails this year and Peltz tries it again next year, because he said it explicitly, I will be back, right? If you don't make changes, I will be back. The next time might not turn out the same way.
Mercenary X21 says, this is people trying to destroy Disney from within. I have heard a lot of conspiracy theories that some of them are double agents. Too fanciful for me. I think they're just simply either A, incompetent, or they simply view the world differently. Like, I swear to God, Kathleen Kennedy, she must be a somewhat clever woman. She managed to screw a certain man out of his life legacy, after all. But
this is very true.
If you think the world is genuinely better with DEI, even though all evidence might be contradictory to it, it becomes a religion at that point. It's like, well, my God says this will work, so I guess I'll double down.
Skulls for the DEI God. Yeah, indeed.
Sujan says, don't forget the stings of pedos that takes place in Disney every other month. Sorry for the non sequitur. I'm in the Helldriver 2 Discord. They're banning people asking about the community manager. Ooh.
I've seen that. Yes, I've seen discussion about that. Very, very interesting. So yeah, this is a reference to the Sheriff Grady Judd, who's the sheriff of Polk County, Florida, which is a county that is adjacent to Disney World. It's right next to Disney World to the south. And Grady Judd has been arresting and stinging on certain criminals, mostly involving criminals involving children and naughty crimes. And routinely, he's done multiple roundups. And every single time he does roundups, he gets numerous Disney employees as part of their stings. Every single time.
Service guarantees citizenship.
Suspicious.
Coincidence? I'll leave that up to you whether that's purely coincidental.
Coincidence indeed. Mercenaries, anyone? Disney has done things to violate the Geneva Convention. Have they now?
Okay. I didn't expect the Geneva Convention. But okay, sure.
Drivey, Disney, the nostalgia of vampires. Pretty much.
Yes. Would agree with that.
Zontar, Peltz's mistake was trying to put himself on the board rather than a proxy. He's textbook example of the incompetent American activist investor.
I don't know whether he was incompetent. That's not. Once again, I don't think it would have turned out differently if he'd nominated somebody else. You can look at his panelist Jay Rasulo, who's probably one of the most qualified people to be on that board. Literally a former Disney employee, so had actual relevant experience. The other nominee other than him. So you would have expected, if that was the real turning point, for them to vote for Rasulo and not vote for Peltz. So that theory doesn't really play out. I think Peltz was doomed to lose. So I frankly, and one thing I was very careful about in my coverage was never to promise Peltz would win, but to say it opens up questions that are uncomfortable for a corporation and brings the eye of Sauron, the eye of the financial world, on Disney. And now they are under the gun. They're under scrutiny. And if they keep getting this bad PR, that is a death knell for a company. So they're in a death spiral, right? This is just just because they win the battle does not mean they win the war, right? This is very much a Pyrrhic victory at best.
Mm-hmm. Service guarantee.
Marksman 117 BLM. Have you seen the anime 86? It's great.
Wait, hold on. Hold on. Let me double check. I may have seen this 86. Yes. The 86ers. Yes, actually, sorry. I said in the chat I didn't see it. I actually have seen this. I really like that anime. It's really good. I'm almost finished with it. I got to the point where they fight the big railgun thing. When they, I don't know spoilers, but they go to a different area and they fight the big railgun thing. But I haven't finished it yet. 86 is quite good. I do quite enjoy it. I'm a fan of mech anime, and it is a form of mech anime. So I'm, of course, engaged on that. So yes, thank you guys for that. Just finished Frieren and Pluto. Pluto was actually really good.
Boog, why is the leaf missing when there's a liar? Dev was called away to attend to his female companion's needs. Such is life.
Such is life.
Mercenary City 1. Also, don't be surprised if Iger cheated at the vote. Oh, that would be a ballsy move, honestly. As I'm pretty sure this one needed to be confirmed by independent investigators,
auditors. Too. Yes. That would be really bad. I mean, is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? Very unlikely. I would put that in the extraordinarily unlikely category.
Dreyfus says, okay, to be a bit conspiratorial, any possibilities Kennedy's was hired by a Disney competitor? Unlikely. The simplest solution is usually the best, in my opinion, and the whole...
Occam's razor, yeah.
Yeah, the whole idea that this is some sort of grand shadowy plot, I don't know.
I'm chalking it up to run-of-the-mill incompetence, which is usually the case.
Yep. Sandoom, I believe Galaxy's Edge was supposed to be Tatooine's Mos Eisley starport, but Kathleen axed that idea. I told this to my mum, and she would have wanted Tatooine. My parents finished high school when A New Hope came out. And only good thing
Everybody wanted Tatooine.
of newer Star Wars is Clone Wars. And you know, like,
Yeah,
they should have. Like, they should have just gone like, okay, visit Mos Eisley, right? And you do the whole thing, and you do some running things with Chewbacca and Han, and you have the Millennium Falcon there. People would have visited that. Do that as kind of like imagine like Westworld, right? But with actors.
Yes.
Do that with Mos Eisley. People would love it.
Oh, and here's the thing: even if you're doing woke Rey and all that, you can still put Rey in Mos Eisley, right? Like even with the Rey model, even assuming they did all the same woke shit with Rey, if they made it Mos Eisley and put all of the characters there, it would not be a problem. Because then they can win their little DEI points because they've got, Rey in there and it's diversity and all that. Rose Tico can show up. No one will go see them. But when you have Luke show up, there's a massive line or whatever, Boba Fett, stuff like that. People would be head over heels about that. I mean, and I apologize for the interruption there, but the passion is that would clearly work. It's such a clear business idea that is a clear winner that you have to deny reality to pretend that this plan that they went with was better. It is a denial of reality, and that's the true absolute state of Star Wars.
Heresy is the question. Fire is the answer.
Absolutely. The DSV Titan, I think that's more a case of paying for someone to mutilate themselves and not paying them to fix the mutilations. I mean, sort of, but again, like, if you believe that transitioning is valid, then surely you must believe that detransitioning is valid. Unless, of course, this has nothing to do with the health of the employee, but rather the political ideology that demands the occasional human sacrifice.
Yeah, I exactly. If you believe that if you intrinsically believe, which is your right? You can believe whatever you want to believe. That's fine. I never stop anybody from believing whatever they choose to believe. But that said, if you are going to believe that, just be consistent in your belief. That's all I've ever expected of really anybody, is to just be consistent. Say, hey, look, I believe that it's possible to float from one gender to the next, in a fluid manner from moment to moment. Okay, that's fine. Well, now you need to provide this level of care that allows you to do that, right? Just do it consistently. I mean, my whole thing is, look, I'm okay with people thinking differently. Just be logically consistent, and they can't do that. That's the problem. They cannot do that.
Absolutely. Because, again, it's not about logic.
No. Or consistency.
Anthony Norwood, sadly, I think the only way to save Disney and its properties for them is to go under and be bought out by people that give a shit. Possibly.
That's a lot of people. It's what I call the accelerationist model, which is it's got to burn for it to be saved, which, I mean, as a concept is true, but that's usually not how things work out in a practical sense.
Also, I just remembered, I forgot part of Boog's question earlier. Do you have a favorite pony?
Oh, Twilight Sparkle.
Oh, there you go, classic. Mercenary X21, I foresee Disney closing the doors permanently before 2025. I would be surprised if it was that early. Look, I'm all for predictions and all that stuff, but that's real aggressive on a timeline. I mean, for them to not be able to borrow money, even like a loan to keep the doors open, that I know the internet. Look, we all want, especially the internet with clickbait and everything, we all would love for that to I mean, if that happened, I'd be printing money left and right with the thumbnails and titles and everything else and all the videos. But that said, it's just not realistic, and I don't ever try to sell people on something that's completely divorced from reality. That would make me no better than them, right? If I was trying to sell you on something that was completely divorced from logic and reality. Sujanda says, if you want a good example of subtle sexism, second Doctor Strange movie. Look at how the Illuminate heroes die. The male heroes die brutal on screen, female heroes die off screen. Could still be alive. Of course. Counterstructure, Hollywood needs another Roger Corman. I don't know who that is. Roger Corman. Made one of the first Marvel movies, really?
They're talking about, okay, I thought there's another Roger Coleman I thought they might be talking about. But anyways, yeah.
Marked Ashamed, Angels Fall First just got an update to include new map. Sorry for the shilling. You do like that game, Marked Ashamed. You do like that game.
Which game?
Angels Fall First. It is a FPS RTS mix thing.
Okay.
Which Marked Ashamed is very, very, very fond of.
Okay, I'm looking it up. Looks cool, though.
Silencio Steve has been a member for 8 months and simply says blip.
Blip.
Raining Tenor. Oh, it's a Legal Mindset and Archley. Weird. But enjoyable, I hope.
I hope so, too.
Marked Ashamed on Rumble. Diverse scum fighting of a super Earth. Winners will join Inclusive Earth. All of Cyberstan. Friends to Terminates. Yeah, the whole Helldivers. I don't know if you've seen this. The Helldivers community manager apparently has really stepped in it.
Yeah, and that's once again, why? You know, like, why was this necessary? Was this once again a self-own? I believe it was, right? A 100% self-outing, right? And it's always the same folks, you know, like, it's always the same folks, which literally makes you ask questions. That's all.
It does. We'll see how they respond to it. It's only been a day so far, and no actual word from Arrowhead, so, we'll see.
Well, you know, and of course they're not, you know, a community mod on, especially if this was on Discord, I believe, or
yes,
yeah. I mean, that's not one for one endorsed by the company, right? They're not a company employee, right? It's not the same thing. In the same way that, for example, you know, one of your if you mod somebody, you know, for your channel, that does not mean they're your employee or agent or whatever. They just have the role of mod, right? So you don't assume that, like, your mod acts for the company, right? So there is a certain level of detachment there, but yeah, we'll see how they react to it. That'll be very interesting.
Red Fox Moon, Little Red Bridge, and Legally Minded would be fun. Little Red Bridge is one of the many nicknames for Dev.
I think when you came on with me, Arch, I think people kept mentioning him as well. So I guess we have to make the commie and the lawyer man face down.
Raining Terror, Archley, why didn't you have the Purple Stateswoman on? Also, if Disney, with his ridiculous resources, should have opened Anime Park, but I hope it bankrupt. Well, you've got Mario. Okay, Mario World.
Well, hold on. There's a talk, and this is not finalized, but like bringing Pokemon to some of the Universal parks, which would be a nuclear bomb if that actually works.
Why the hell not? Honestly, it's got enough cultural influence at this point.
Yeah, I mean, it would be massive. And you know, once again, they know how to make these immersive places that allow you to escape, right? So that's one of the biggest things.
Yep. And with Disney being dumber and dumber every year, the competition is shrinking and shrinking, so why not benefit? Boog. CR already has a bunch of production seats until 2025. Disney is buying up seats, and Kurakawa has been censoring anime for global standards.
Once again, what certain companies do is not going to stop all companies, and there are other companies there, right? So I get yes. There's isolated examples where indeed there is censorship, and it should be spoken up against, right? But I think as a whole, it's not going to happen. And what you guys don't understand, which is very hard to explain, particularly for people that have never stepped foot in Japan, which I find comical because a lot of folks that will comment on these things have never even been to Japan. If you step into a game store, there's many used game stores, you will see how many games never made it to America. They were never translated. Same thing for manga. There's so much that has never really made it over. It's just not to the point where you need to worry about a major issue with the complete corruption of Japan. Yes, there can be major studios that have issues, and we should push back against it. But I don't think it's going to completely corrupt the entire industry.
It's a question if they learned the lessons that we did, I think. As there are already political pushes in Japan as well to try and normalize the wokeist nonsense. We'll see how far it gets. I hope not very.
It hasn't. It really. It's always been fringe, right? In the same way that like you have fringe politicians in the U.S. that want fringe crazy stuff, and it's good that we call it out when we see it, because if you call it out and you name it as fringe, that is a good thing. So I think that is a good thing, but I wouldn't be in fear of it taking over tomorrow. I'll just say that.
Boo further says, most production committees are producing for a global market now. Bleach was censored against Kubo's wishes. It's not happening is not an argument.
Yeah, I didn't say it's not happening, but what I'm saying is in terms of it taking over all of your anime, right? There's always going to be ways in which to access anime. So for example, right, if they are messing with the official translation of something, right, you can go to the manga. Right, you can go to the scanlation, you can go to the fan translation, right? That's why those things are popular. So you'll just go to those, or you'll go to games that do not bend the knee. Look at Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade is killing it, #1 in pre-sales, because it's not woke, and they don't give a fuck that people were trying to shame them for having a sexy video game model, right? I think we've got some stuff. It doesn't all need to be black pills. I know everybody loves the black pills, but it doesn't always need to be all black pill all the time.
A little bit of hope is never bad.
Yep.
Mario Trujillo, Disney fought over the Space Marines only to face the death god of Krieg. Reality is so much stranger than fiction. Disney is just a face of Slanesh.
Indeed.
Boog says, 1, it's not happening. It's a right-wing conspiracy. 2, it happened a couple of times. People blow it out of proportion. And 3, it's happening, and that's a good thing. The 3 stages of leftism.
Okay.
Nathan Cassidy, Japan has a tendency Western IP very respectfully. A good example is Batman Child of Dreams, a Batman manga that might as be a Batman comic. Syntax. Well, I hope so, because if they can remain true to the spirit of the character and not the DEI version of them, then anime might actually be the salvation for a lot of the DC stuff. We'll see. I'm waiting with bated breath to see how Suicide Squad does. I expect nothing, and I cannot thus be disappointed.
Yeah, I have zero expectations for any of that. Anything that's been, like, once again, if it's touched by that, I just say, okay, well, I'm writing it off. And look, for me, I do regular anime episodes, and I see many of my folks in the chat here today, and we talk about anime. There's so much to watch. I can't even keep up with it. If I wanted to try to watch all the good anime right now, I can't. It's impossible. And that doesn't even go into manga, right? So for people to say that it's like, to ever dream of it being completely co-opted is, I think, ridiculous.
Rangi might be worth putting Legally Minded in touch with a certain snack. She's talked enough about Haven stuff to make me wonder if she'd mind that.
What are we talking about now?
Let me see if I can find here on Twitter.
Heresy's the question. Fire is the answer.
I do have a little VTuber friend who's talked about this. I think that is who they're referring to.
Is it Kirsha?
No, not Kirsha. Kirsha is not a snake.
Guarantees citizenship.
Fox, I think, or something.
Yeah, no, she's a fox. I was like, it's not. I'm like, it's not Kirsha, but I've definitely had a conversation with Kirsha.
Service guarantees
There,
citizenship.
I'll put it in the link channel so you can check it out if you are so interested.
Okay, cool.
Boog, second that. LM should talk to the Danger Noodle. The Danger Noodle is another name for
Fire is the answer.
Rosa.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it. Yeah, we'll follow it now.
Counterstructure. AI in creative work will be like excavator before the steam-powered ones. There was a whole one job of digger, shovel, and bucket all day long. There is going to be a lot to go through for making good AI stories, as the AI's primary problem right now is that the AI doesn't actually understand consistency. Like it has no concept of and then, you know? It's the same reason why it's so difficult to get AI to do decent animations, because the AI doesn't understand that after this frame, the next frame would logically follow. But this is essentially a coding language problem that will be solved fairly soon, I suspect, actually.
Yeah, I mean, once again, you know, people mocking AI, and this happens a lot, especially as I've tiptoed into the VTuber world as well. You know, people will say, "Oh, well, AI can't do X, Y, Z." Yeah, it can't do that now, right? 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, it couldn't do what it does today. So to try to say it will never be able to do X, like, hold on, buddy. You know, 10 or 20 years from now, that may not be the case.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember there was a while ago where there was the idea that McDonald's workers would never be replaced by robots because, like, it requires too many things to be done. You know, got to make the burger patties,
Right.
pack the salad, etc. And it will never
Right.
be economical. Well, California just raised the minimum wage again, and suddenly McDonald's is making automated food shops. Well, imagine.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, with automation, the only thing that prevents every single McDonald's store from utilizing nothing but fucking robots is because it's a big one-time expense. And companies don't like big one-time expenses. Like, there's a lot of money to shell out right now. But the moment you get like $15 an hour minimum wage, which is a lot of money, suddenly that one-time expense starts looking real tempting.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing, right? So this is exactly what you said. At a certain point, the capital outlay justifies itself. They don't want to pay for the capital outlay, but what I've noticed internationally is all these branches in all the countries that I've gone to. I mean, Korea, Japan, Thailand, Philippines, Singapore. It's all going digital, right? So like they're just moving towards. You know, you order from the kiosk. The kiosk is your primary order. And then, you know, you'll have a human that'll, you know, maybe deliver the food to you or call your number or whatever else. I mean, we're only moving that direction.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen these somewhere. Let me see if I can find a picture of them. Here we go. I'll put that in the link channel. These little automated serving thingies. So this is a very simple robot. It's got a simple, like, infrared scanning device at the bottom, so it can find people and chairs and stuff. And then it's got a bunch of shelves. And it knows where the tables are, so you put the food on the shelf, and then you tell the robot, go to table 3. And the robot just goes and does that. And this is a job that once required a person. So now maybe you only need one person at the counter, taking orders and, like, giving them to the kitchen. So you already removed one job. And this was one of the jobs that people thought would be most difficult to get rid of, because surely, you know, maneuvering through a restaurant, you're going to have to avoid people and find tables, etc. Well, this robot does that. No problems.
Yeah.
Plus, it's adorable. It'll never give you a lip. It'll never drop your food.
Plus, it's cute. That's always like the bonus points. It's like, but it's cute too. You know?
Yes, all of them have little smiling anime faces on their little displays, like, hello, food.
I mean, have you seen you saw the quote unquote controversy over McDonald's Japan because there was that like cute pro family like anime ad and there was a big like, you know, kerfuffle over that, I guess.
Yep, I did see that. Weird saying, seeing bots on YouTube attacking smaller people for bringing light to Helldivers. When bots are running interference, you know the company is compromised. Yes. We'll see. I am watching the Arrowhead thing with great interest. Because this is the moment where the company actually needs to stand up and go like... And they don't need to fire the person even, but they just gotta make a statement saying, yeah, no, the whole statement that they said that they weren't, banning both sides was wrong. We've told them to act more professionally from now on. Fair enough. But right now, it kind of seems like they're trying to burrow it. Granted, it's the weekend, so, there's that, but... We'll see.
give them till Monday, but, it's... Yeah.
Mercenary X21, Occam's razor doesn't exist if you know what I did. Well, we'll see. It certainly would be more interesting if this was all a great shadowy conspiracy. We will get a movie in like 10 years' time simply titled Disney or Kathleen or something.
That'd be great.
Marksman of 117B, the payout after the 86V railgun fight is so good. I have watched
it is.
But I'm not going to give any spoilers either.
Okay, good.
Marked ashamed. Arch, everyone on YouTube is saying ad revenue is gone. What gives? I don't know. I have seen some of the usual complaints going around about that, but the thing is, YouTube is a really volatile platform, and sometimes... sometimes people cry wolf over... dips in the ad revenue, dips in the market, dips in donations, dips in viewerships. All of this stuff is just, it happens.
Yeah. And it doesn't always, it's not always YouTube being nefarious, although sometimes it is.
Sometimes it is.
Yeah.
Like, we've had how many adpocalypses now, etc.?
Right.
But I know Shad Diversity had a big thing about it, but I also know Shad has made a frightening quantity of enemies over his vociferous stance on AI as well. So the question then becomes, is it YouTube? Is it you? Is it third parties? And it can often be really difficult to determine as well.
Fire is the answer.
Yes. That's the thing. It's like how do you know that's attributable to YouTube?
Yep. It's not like YouTube tells you.
No.
If YouTube came up and said like, oh, right, yeah, no, we've reduced your recommendations by like 50%, then you'd go like, okay, why? But no, it's all hidden in the back end, YouTube doing its thing.
Yeah, and they will never tell you.
Service guarantees
Anthony
citizenship.
Norwood, what I want is Disney to fire all the DEI people, but I think the more likely thing is the solution, but some like BlackRock scooping them up and making it worse. Possibly.
Service guarantees
Yeah,
citizenship.
it could happen.
I mean, if Disney ever goes on a fire sale, let's just put it like this. It's not going to be independent content creators that pick up those licenses.
No.
If you think Disney was bad.
Yeah.
Marksman of 117B. MLP, the show about genocide as new gen shows. Yes, it kind of was. Poor Hasbro. Hasbro thought they had a winner in My Little Pony, and then they made a sequel, getting rid of all of the original characters, and it failed miserably. Weirdly
That's
enough.
what tends to happen.
It's like they could have just continued printing money with the old thing, but that was simply too easy. John think scariest thing about living in Korea? Finding out the ladies go au natural. I even saw a braided one once. Whoa. That's one part of Western imperialism we simply must bring eastwards.
Yes. The emperor's truth about grooming habits should be brought to everybody. Yes, agree.
Boog, Kadokawa is more than half the industry.
Okay, but you just proved the point there. It's not the entire industry, is it?
Sandoom, any pitiful hope for Fallout TV series, Arch? I mean, I have become blue-eyed and optimistic in my old days. I have hopes, but we'll see. I've become like a battered housewife with entertainment. I keep thinking, oh, this time it could be good. I'm very rarely rewarded for my faith.
Yeah, I assume it's good. I mean, once again, I try to be positive, but at the same time, I assume that it's going to be bad, and then I'm pleasantly surprised when it's good. And I think that works out better for me psychologically.
And Sandu, now we can get AI to fix English dubs for anime. Yeah, I'm actually quite interested in the AI being used for translation purposes.
See, there we go. That's exactly what I'm talking about. When there will be a market opening up for that. So let's say the localizers get even more woke and they start making it crazy woke. Well, that's just going to open it up to people making their own AI that translates it, and they'll run it off of a server bounced off a Kazakhstani server or something like that. I mean, there's going to be a solution for this, right? Particularly when it comes to anime and manga. I just don't see it, there not being a solution for it, especially when people start getting creative with AI.
Absolutely. And it will make it far easier to spread the author's original vision. I mean, eventually, at some point, we will arrive at the point where the big anime and manga publishers themselves will start to become defunct, because the people making a manga can probably just digitalize the whole thing. They've already got it on a digital file, slap on an AI translation, release it to the entire world, in Turkish, English, French, whatever you want.
Yeah, and don't have to worry about localizing, because you just have the AI translate it and you're done. And it's good enough.
Danny D, as an older weeb, I must say, I feel vindicated by my preference for fan translations and subs versus officially localized media. Same, I've always kind of sworn by fan translators, honestly.
Yeah, it's what I grew up on. I'm very used to it. So, I mean, when somebody's like, oh, no, you'll have to go back to fan translation. Oh, how horrible. The horror of No, I'm perfectly okay with this.
Anthony Norwood, Japan is actually quite racist. When I was there as a white person, I was not even allowed in some bars until my Japanese friends vouched for me. That is true.
This is true. And once again, in a weird way, that's the good thing, right? I mean, in the sense that if that's their attitude, do you really think they're gonna bend the knee to fully bend the knee to American style DEI? The answer is no, right? I can't go into onsense because I have tattoos, right? Like still to this day, because they associate that with the Yakuza, right? Like there's it's not gonna completely percolate its way through Japanese society. If but only their xenophobia, right? That will keep it at least preserved to a certain extent.
Yep. Boog, 3 stages of right wing. 1, it's not happening, you're being paranoid. 2, it happened a bit, it won't take it all over. And 3, why does Star Wars suck now? I always like it when people argue with the chat. It's very profitable.
Oh yes, it's great.
Dean Dominant 25, great call up here today. Bridge is more than just DEI rebranded. Kirsha has the info. Also wishing the best for Shondo, going on hiatus for health.
Yeah, I got the info on Bridge from Kirsha, so shout out to her for that. Like, she was the one who informed me of that, and I definitely, yes, it is more than just. It's more. I mean, I made that clarification. It is more than just 2.0. It's a redoing of DEI and rebranding, but the point is, the reason is what I said. It's because DEI, the label of DEI, the brand of DEI has been hit, and people are aware of it. So they're now shifting it into this new speak of Bridge. So the good thing is that the word is getting out about Bridge. And people are learning about it and where they want to go with it. And, obviously it should and must be stopped.
Yes, I don't think it's as big of a danger as it's made out to be, because what you and I and many others have done for so long is not simply just go like, hey, ESG bad. It's not about that. It's about changing the culture. It is about making woke in and of itself unpalatable. And once something becomes unpalatable, you can repack it as many times you want, it'll still be shit. Like they say, you cannot polish a turd.
Yes, exactly, precisely. Like it's not going to become something that people want, because people fundamentally don't want this. Even the people that you're trying to pander to don't want it.
Mr. Cool Gamer, hey Arch, what books would you recommend for someone that wants to learn more after watching your vids about current conflict from the strategic point of view, or just favorite military-related books? I would actually recommend a book I'm reading right now. Let's see if I can find the name proper of it. It's about the Franco-Prussian War. Let's see. It was a very, very specific author. I could find it, but I had to get up and go to my bathroom, where I keep all of the books I'm currently reading, of course, like any normal human. There it is.
Interesting and underrated war, because it really determines so much of the future. Franco-Prussian War, that is.
Yes, the Franco-Prussian War by... cooperate with me, internet. Loading. By Michael Howard. This one here, I'll bring it up on screen. Excellent book on the Franco-Prussian War. And yes, the Franco-Prussian War is almost a lost war today because it was so completely outclipped by the First World War. But almost everything that happened in the First World War happened in the Franco-Prussian War first.
Correct.
It has a lot of very interesting lessons about the nature of large-scale warfare, about maneuvering, about orders, logistics, the general confusion of battle, the fact that nobody knew what any of their weapons did, and somehow failed to learn even after the war was finished. Very fascinating conflict. Dreyfie. The anime translation has been weird. Remember the 90s when they made those Sailor Moon lesbians into cousins? I know.
Oh, yeah. That was funny. Yeah, I remember that.
Max Mountain B. The Korean barbecue, my house uses those robots. Well, there you go. I mean, they're really useful. They're nice, small, cute, useful. Takes certainly a bit of investment to begin with, but once you start looking at what you're paying in monthly salaries, adds up quick.
Yeah, they're very ubiquitous. When I lived in Korea, they're very, very, very ubiquitous. At the airport, at Incheon Airport, they have like multiple robots running around, and the restaurants all have like server robots. So, they're just becoming more and more ubiquitous. I think you're going to see them more places.
Berg provides a counterpoint. Urban youths will prevent the robot takeover. They might. Have you seen the
urban youths? It's just like a funny phrase.
I'm sure you understand the meaning of the term.
I'm fully aware. Yeah.
But you've seen in America those like what brand? They're like the Fedora delivery robots or the Food Brand delivery robots.
Yes.
Yes, and people rob the shit out of them.
Yes, because they're just asking for it, right? It's like with the drones, like people shooting down the drones because, I mean, it kind of like it is a little bit asking for it. I'm not gonna lie, like, it's kind of easy if you really think about it.
Yeah, because here's the thing. If you're in like a high trust Scandinavian society, then there being a robot going like, "Hello, I'm bringing food with me," that might pass muster because people are so indoctrinated in that they don't you don't just rob the fucking robots. What's wrong with you? But in America, there's an Amazon Prime robot just trundling by, could carry thousands of dollars of stuff. Yeah, I don't know about that.
We're gonna hold up the Amazon robot for sure, 100%. Yeah, it's gonna happen.
And I love how also they were like, okay, our security measures. This one has a siren. Like, oh great, I'm sure the burglar will care. I'm sure he'll give a shit. It's like, oh, now they're noisy. Hits it harder.
Like that's prevented people in the past. It's like, oh my god, it had a burglar alarm. Therefore, the house is not going to get broken into. Yeah.
Yeah, like this kind of like open waffling around society automation. That is going to require a very different society before it becomes truly functional.
Yeah.
But hey, up until then, I guess we'll all enjoy teaching Amazon a lesson.
Well, it works in either high trust or high enforcement, right? Because so if the punishments for the crime is severe enough, then it would be possible. But yeah, that's not going to happen yet.
Yep. Rengi, LM, Rosa has survived 2 graduations with her IP. That's true.
Good. I'm happy for her.
Oh, we're approaching the end finally. Giga Twin, my beloved Super Robot Wars franchise has really only had titles from its original generation games be released outside Asia. Then there's Fire Emblem franchise, when Fire Emblem 7 was the first English title.
Correct.
See, Japan just hated the gaijin for a very long time. There was this culture in Japanese entertainment that if you made something for the West, they would just like steal it or pirate it or something, and it just wasn't worth the effort. And even if it was, they wouldn't like it, etc. It has taken a very long time for Japan to finally realize that, oh, there are people outside of Japan who like anime. Weird.
Yeah, and even then they're reluctant, right? So that's what I was saying. Like the amount that is converted over is a fraction of what is there.
Yes.
And once again, unless you've seen that, it's hard to understand that.
Mr. Twisted Frenzy, what's the end game for automation? If every job in existence became automated and everything runs by a handful of companies, how are they going to sell anything when everyone can't earn money to buy anything? Literally, the end point of automation will be communism. In a way.
That's where they want to go.
Yeah.
That's where they want to go. They want to go towards full on UBI, own nothing, be happy, WEF. Like they want that. Yes.
If we ever arrive at a point where we can automate everything, and we have the raw resources, mind you, that's important as well, to supply that industry, that will be the point where we could potentially see a society move beyond money and simply you can have like energy allotted credits a la the Star Trek world, yeah, right? But we're not there yet. It's going to be a while before we get there.
Yeah, and you know, we've got so much of the world, like people think about it in terms of like, okay, is it possible in like a high trust society in a very advanced economy? Sure, but that is not on a global scale. And, you know, it's the same thing whenever I talk about, for example, like electric cars or, you know, moving away from oil. It's like, that's very nice. You can move off of oil, but India's not moving off of oil. Pakistan's not moving off of oil. Yep. Brazil's not moving off of oil, right? That's just, it's, you know, it's a nice thought. It's cute for, you know, Europe to think about it. You know, it's very adorable, but the rest of the world is just not going to follow those rules because they want to develop and come up too. And they want the advantages that other countries exercise coming up.
Yeah, because people don't understand this thing. We think the West is how the world is. No, the West is the minority of the world. Our pretty little places, our clean little places where we worry about our carbon footprints and our pollution. Oh,
heresy's the question.
The rest of the world don't give a shit. Like, literally, search pictures of the Ganges River. You'll see how little of a fuck the rest of the world gives about this.
That's a great example. Like they have other, like, clean water is an issue, right? You know, it's something that we've largely solved, and like they literally don't have clean water. They don't even, in fact, water sources are a problem. So there's you know, in terms of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's still places that are somewhere else on the hierarchy of needs chart. And as long as that's the case, it's not going to be able to be a thing.
Yeah, no. There are places in the world that literally, as you say, they worry about something as basic as clean water. You know, the stuff we casually flush down our toilet by millions of liters every year, that's a problem for them.
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. There you go. That's a fantastic picture.
So, yeah, I mean, hey, we should still do it. We do need alternative energy sources because there's only so much oil, etc. It does have pollutions. It is ineffective. But here's also the thing. The only thing that earns enough money to pay for the transition to renewable energy is fossil fuels.
Right.
So yeah, we're gonna be dealing with this for a while longer. Reverend Norse, you're both wrong on the Eastern grooming. It's another area where they are superior to the West. Move away from the barren West and embrace lush East. I don't know about that.
I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, I live in Asia, so I don't know what you're talking about. I think I'm embracing it as closely as possible.
Sujad, someone recommended Mech Knights before. I'd second this. High-quality Slavjank armored core. You can have 4 Twin Light Gatlings Gauss. Mechanized. I think that's a it's like game Steam, I think.
I don't know. I loved Armor Core. Armor Core is great.
Armor Core was pretty good, yeah.
Oh yeah, well, not all of them, but yeah.
Mercenary X21, making Sailor Moon Les into cousins made it better. Oh, a southerner.
Okay. All right.
Silencio Steve, Dreadnought pizza delivery. I mean, yeah, we're gonna end up. We are going to have to end up with armored boxes, unironically.
Great.
Mr. Bob 7370, arm the delivery drones. I'm sure that will go down fantastically. Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I could see no problems with this.
Hello, K1D4. It's only a matter of time those delivery bots GTA a secure Tron escort. I mean, yeah, if they want them to operate independently, they are actually going to have to, like, guard them somehow or armor them or something.
Up armored delivery drones, like they're Humvees rolling through Iraq to be able to deliver to Chicago and Detroit.
And still, it'll be like the opening scene from Judge Dredd or something. People just throw Molotovs at them.
Exactly. I mean, it's kind of funny to think about. I actually think it's comical, but yeah, that would be that is a problem. It's a practical implementation problem.
Zero Firewater, now do another collab and bond with Warhammer, or do a 3-way collab with the Conspiracy Fox. Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we've
Service
talked
guaranteed
a lot about
citizenship.
topics, and we talked Warhammer on my channel. I mean, always happy to have many conversations with Arch. I think we have really good, fun conversations. So I'm always happy to come back.
I think so too. Panda Ace, where is Dev? Isn't he the American legal expert? He is being cajoled by his woman right now. It was impossible to prevent. And last one, having worked in American fast food for over 10 years, those robots are gonna get jacked. I have seen things you people wouldn't believe.
General consensus is those robots are gonna get raided.
I mean, it is like
I love it.
the little Fedora robot. It's tiny, it's pink, it's made of easily crushable plastic. It just drives through the neighborhood like, "Hello, I have free food aboard. Please don't beat me up." Yeah. Again, in a very high trust society, this might work. In America,
Yes.
in most of the world, no.
Yeah. Also, where there's a lot of CCTVs, right? So that's another thing about at least when I was in Korea. Like, part of it is there's a camera everywhere. So they go back and review that for everything. I was with a friend and they broke their ankle, and because of they tripped on a misplaced like sidewalk paver, and they went and pulled the CCTV video, and they found exactly the moment when they tripped. And they paid him out because they said, "Yep, this
Heresy's
is something
the
that should have been
question.
fixed." So
Fire is the
it
answer.
just once again things we don't have in the U.S. And don't have integrated like that.
And this is why Fedora uses the humans to carry stuff still, because the moral barrier is still
Service guarantees
higher for
citizenship.
robbing the fuck out of a human than a robot. So hey, there's your white pill of the day.
Yeah, sure, that's true.
Service guarantees citizenship.
There you go. Yeah, a little bit of optimism there. Then they start pouring in more. Panda Ace, most Super Robot War games I played as fan
Service
translated.
guarantees
I
citizenship.
trust them more than the official because it's a labor of passion, because they don't get paid. That's true. It's all voluntary. Why?
Yes,
What is their need to fuck with it?
they've got no incentive, right? They just love the game, right? That's why this whole attacking fans is like insanity to me, because fans have no incentive but to love the product. They don't have a financial incentive. So that's what always has been the ridiculous thing to me about the war against the fans.
Yep. Now it is like 4 a.m. where you are, so if you need to go, just tell me.
It's actually 5 a.m.
5, Jesus, yeah. Well, definitely don't feel pressured. The chat might be mean and send like $2 super chats.
We can round this out. It's fine.
Service guarantees
I'm already up.
citizenship.
Sandoom, legal stay and Dev stay under his communist bridge. Poor Dev. Johnson Smith, ironic, the first time they send an armed robot, and the armed robot is robbed for his weapons, and then his weapon is used to commit more crimes. I mean, that would be a problem, yeah. Now you're bringing weapons into the urban youth. You're arming the competition.
You're arming them with robot weaponry. I love it. I love it. It's like the exact. Honestly, like that gives me hope for the dystopian future. You know, it's like that's actually great.
The ultimate test of robotics will be the Fedora robot versus the hungry urban youth. Which one can evolve faster? Dreyfy, Ed209 for Waffle House. At least get the food there, you know. Johnson Smith, Tabletop Simulator on your Sunday stream, but you guys are actually playing the game 140k. Yes, do it. Tabletop Simulator is a great piece of software that has not been improved upon anywhere near enough. And Anthony Norwood, I saw the perfect example of how the rest of the world works. When I deployed, I gave a kid the candy out of my MRE. 2 minutes later, a fat kid knocked him out and took it. Yes, it was funny, a little kid was fine. Yeah, no, well, that...
Oh, that's actually funny.
That is simple economy in many other places. Like, I saw that man give you a chocolate bar. Yeah, what of it? Well, punch.
Give me your fucking chocolate bar. Yeah, exactly. And that's how the world works, right? And this is the problem with a lot of the well-intentioned stuff, right? Like it's the thought, oh, well, we feel it'll work this way. Yeah, but that's not how it's gonna really work, right? You know, oftentimes we have a problem like what's called the free rider problem. You know, whenever you give stuff out to a certain group or populace or, you know, for a certain reason, there's going to be people that are trying to abuse that. And if your program is not tailored to deal with that, you're going to have issues. The most famous of which was the Cobra issue in India, where they paid a bounty for the body, the corpse of any cobra, because there was an abundance of cobras, and they wanted to get rid of the cobras. Well, Arch, do you know what happened when they did that?
I do not. What happened?
Well, people started farming cobras.
That's brilliant.
Because they were paying per corpse. So they ended up farming cobras, and then they stopped the bounty, and guess what people did? They released the farmed cobras, so there was even bigger of a problem with cobras after that well-intentioned program, right? The intention was good, but the result was not, right? Which is very true for a lot of societal programs.
Yep. I mean, if you give society a way to benefit from something, don't be surprised if society finds a way to benefit from it.
Yep.
Silencio Steve, mean $2 super chat. Thank you. And Subject Noble, if you add 10 pounds of C4 on the robot, it will win.
I mean, define win, right? That's like what's your definition of winning?
The thing is, even if you covered it in claymores, the urban youth will only just send out the weakest of their number then to detonate one side, and then it's like, well, food, everyone. God, the war between the Fedora robots and the urban youth will be epic indeed.
That's great.
And Mark Ashamed, there were designated drop sites for drones at certain food deserts. Don't forget a bribe such as cigarettes or booze for the volunteers providing security. That's true. Maybe the ultimate solution is to turn the urban youth against themselves.
Maybe they've already done that.
Pay some of them to protect the Fedora robot. That's just terrible. That is just awful in every way. Zero Firewater, I don't trust the government with cameras everywhere. They're currently trying to make a Chinese system right now, but the end result might be way worse.
Oh, by the way, I don't trust the government with that either. I'm just saying that's one of the reasons, right? Not because it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm just saying that's what exists. It exists in China too. That doesn't make it good. I'm just saying it's one of the factors.
Boog, C4 bot is just a new form of surprise mechanics. That's true. Sven Hallgren, urban youth sounds better than shitunger. It does.
Heresy
It
is
does.
the question.
It's a good term.
Fire is the
It is
answer.
actually a good term because everyone knows what it refers to. without-
Everyone knows what it refers to without you having to say a damn thing. Yes.
Yep. It paints a vivid picture in the mind.
Service guarantees citizenship.
No one says delivery drones could be flying cops. Install some tasers on them, maybe? Electrical nets? And Johnson Smith, law of unintended consequences. And people are too unwise to realize that just because you want good doesn't mean that their want doesn't cause evil. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah, give the Iraqi child the chocolate bar, and then a larger Iraqi child decides that he wants the chocolate bar. Okay.
Right.
There you go. Law of the jungle. And Subject Noble, a member has been a member for 2 months. Everything within the state, nothing outside the state, nothing against the state. Dev, probably. Probably Dev. Right. We have finally reached the end of the Super Chats.
Very good. Well, that was excellent. I enjoyed those. Those were very good. Chat was good today.
Chat was good today. Right. Thank you very much for coming on today, Legal Mindset. And there will be links, of course, to all of your social media and channels and stuff in the description below if anyone wants to check him out. I highly recommend it.
Service guarantees citizenship.
Well, thank you, and I hope to be back on again.
Definitely. And thank you, chat, for watching and for your generous donations, as always, of course. And we will see you all again next week. Have a good day, chat.
Service guarantees citizenship.